Phoenix Nights. Chapter 503. Zeta didn't understand what 10,000 black crystal coins meant. Facing the girl's punch that contained strong determination, he instinctively felt unprecedented danger. He hurriedly activated the bloodline talent of the great demon tribe, teleportation, and barely avoided the blow. With the demon overlord level power level and talent, the distance of this teleportation was very far, but it couldn't escape the girl's powerful perception ability. She immediately judged the position of Zeta's teleportation. She stepped in the air and closed the distance in the blink of an eye. This kind of flying ability made Zeta's eyelids twitch. The magic wand in his hand emitted a strong wind element magic fluctuation, and an extremely powerful blue lightning struck the girl. The girl didn't dodge as if she didn't see the lightning. She didn't use any defensive or dodging means either. She let the lightning hit her body. Zzz. Amidst the electric arc, the girl shook the remaining electric debris on her body nonchalantly as if it was just an insignificant breeze. She flew toward Zeta without slowing down. Zeta could hardly believe his eyes. This lightning seemed ordinary, but it was his proud work of studying compound magic. In addition to lightning, it also contained the power of the water element. Its power was several times that of ordinary lightning magic. Even a powerhouse of the same level couldn't take it head-on without dodging, but the girl did it. At this time, Zeta could no longer use the great demon's teleportation talent, but he still had the teleportation magic. He used teleportation again to open the distance. The moment he stabilized his figure, the quickly brewing magic was launched again. Several poisonous clouds mixed with white mist sprayed out and wrapped the girl. This was a combination of the two magic, poison cloud, and ice explosion. Unfortunately, it was still useless. The girl passed through the exploding poisonous cloud casually. Even the cloak on her body wasn't torn at all. Zeta's back was already full of cold sweat. He teleported away again without using any offensive magic. Decelerate, weaken, curse. He launched all of them at the girl, trying to destroy the opponent's attack rhythm. The girl received all of them as before, but she was a little tired of this enemy's repeated futile attacks. She looked at the position and came in front of Zeta in the blink of an eye. She punched him head-on. Before the punch reached him, the terrifying fluctuations caused the space to distort slightly. Judging from the speed and power of the punch, it was not affected by the debuff magic at all. Zeta was horrified. He had cast the magic too quickly just now, and there was no time to use the teleportation magic. He immediately patted the magic tools on his body, and a round transparent magic shield immediately appeared around him. The girl's punch hit the shield, and the originally sturdy circular shield turned into an oval shape under the extremely terrifying pressure. Even Zeta, who was wrapped in it, was sent flying far away. Although the protective shield blocked this punch, Zeta didn't feel good at all. It was as if he was in a stormy sea and could be crushed at any time. His nose and the corners of his mouth couldn't bear the pressure anymore as blood flowed out. The shield lost a lot of magic power support under the pressure. Finally, it disappeared without a trace. Zeta swayed and almost fell to the ground. He felt like he had escaped from death. Immune to magic and powerful attack power. This was the nemesis of all mages. What could they use to fight him? Seeing the girl rushing over again, Zeta, who was scared out of his wits, couldn't care about Seymour anymore. He unleashed his extraordinary potential, exerted his flying skill to the extreme, and fled far away with all his strength. Escape? The conspiracy to make me deduct money is simply unforgivable. The girl's voice flew away with Zeta's figure. Looking from afar, she seemed to have turned into a huge black cloud-like body. Then a horrifying scream sounded faintly. Seymour had no time to pay attention to so much. He didn't even have the chance to fight the mysterious cloaked cavalry leader because there was a terrifying enemy wrapped in flames in front of him. The other party hadn't activated the territory yet, but the breath of power made Seymour's territory tremble. Toro family's elder who surrendered to the Dark Moon, Demon Overlord Vanim. It's over. It's completely over. Not only me, but also the entire army. The surging flame power in the sky had wrapped Seymour's territory tightly. There was no hope of escape. For some reason, Seymour suddenly thought of the battle with the mysterious cavalry leader that night. Although he saw the enemy cavalry general in a cloak and the skills similar to magic shadow charge, a subtle feeling told him that the opponent that night was Nesta. At this point, what the truth was no longer important because he lost. Winner takes all. It was that simple. Even if he escaped back to the Red Spirit City, there was only one result for him, a defeated general who was completely annihilated. As for whether Nesta was innocent or not, it was meaningless. If he surrendered to the Dark Moon, there would also be no good result. Let alone the hatred with Nesta, the Dark Moon would be destroyed sooner or later with the capital's military strength. Seymour felt that his territory power was on the verge of collapse under the demon overlord level flame. If he didn't want to be captured alive, there was only one way left. Seymour's face showed a fierce and resolute expression. He made the biggest and last decision in his life. The extremely oppressed power of his whole body suddenly became manic, as if it was some kind of terminal lucidity. His blood vessels and muscles began to swell terrifyingly. Boom! The one-sided battle came to an end very quickly. There was no suspense in the outcome of the 30,000 elite soldiers who had been waiting for their fatigue against the 10,000 exhausted and leaderless soldiers. A few days later, outside the Red Spirit City, the Coalition Army camp, Obsidian listened to the military report in front with a pale face. The Nether Hydra Legion and 2 estates, a total of 90,000 people, were all annihilated. The Nether Hydra Legion's commander, Seymour, died. The 2 lords, Sadr and Jax, were captured. The elder of the Elder family, the Cayman family, Demon Overlord Zeta, was captured. Kanita, the heir of the Red Spirit estate, died. The Magic Shadow Legion's commander, Nesta, led 4,000 Magic Shadow Legion cavalries to surrender to the enemy. This was a complete fiasco. The 90,000 vanguard troops were all annihilated without exception. Soon, the 3 captured people were released by the Dark Moon, including the 2 lords and the Elder family's demon overlord. The Dark Moon publicly declared that Obsidian was the Dark Moon's biggest enemy by forcing the lords and Elder families to conquer the Dark Moon. However, the Dark Moon had no enmity with the estates and Elder families. In order to show goodwill, the captives were released this time, but it would not happen again. If the lords and Elder families stubbornly wanted to help Black to abuse, the Dark Moon would never be merciful. Seymour's fate was an example. Although the 3 captives were released, they were imprisoned by a strange force, unable to exert their strength. From the 3 of them, Obsidian and the lords learned about the battle, including the truth that Nesta was framed by Seymour for personal revenge and was finally forced to surrender to the enemy angrily. Somehow, this truth was quickly publicized. There were also news of Kanita's murder and the Capital Army's various atrocities in the Red Spirit Estate. The entire Red Spirit Estate was discussing. Regent Obsidian forced the loyal minister to rebel, appointed villains, and killed the Lord's heir, Kanita. The Capital Army is perverse and cruel. It is not comparable to the Dark Moon's invaders. The Red Spirit Lord, Josh, complained to Obsidian about the wrongful death of his heir, Kanita, and the various misdeeds of the Nether Hydra Legion in Town Mordo in front of all the lords. This made Obsidian even more embarrassed. He had the urge to put together the fragments of Seymour's self-destruction and whip the corpse. For the victim, Josh, Obsidian could only try his best to appease him. He promised to personally preside over Kanita's funeral, confer the posthumous title of the Empire's brave general, and appoint Josh as the Coalition Army's chief affairs officer in charge of orders and military supplies. This was a lucrative job, and it was also a compensation for Josh. Just when Josh was organizing Kanita's funeral, something unexpected happened again. The elder of the Cayman family, Demon Overlord Zeta, who was released, suddenly died. This incident caused a commotion among the elder families. In order to become an elder family, qualifications and strength were the 2 biggest factors. The Demon Overlord was equivalent to the strongest pillar of strength of an elder family. Now that Zeta died suddenly, the Cayman family was equivalent to being strong in appearance but weak in reality. It would inevitably decline. Obsidian quickly convened a military meeting. At the meeting, he angrily denounced the Dark Moon's conspiracy to murder Zeta. Unfortunately, the elder family's reaction to this was generally relatively indifferent. The Dark Moon had announced that they would publicly release the elder families and lord captives. Making a move at this time was tantamount to shooting oneself in the foot. Moreover, many people in the elder families had checked Zeta's body. It was not some confinement method that activated. There was no damage on the surface, but his internal organs were all shattered. This kind of power could only be achieved by at least the strength of the Demon Emperor level. The Dark Moon has a Demon Emperor level spy who sneaked into the Coalition army and killed the released captive Zeta? Some representatives of the elder families couldn't help but sneer. Obsidian was not a fool. He saw the doubts of the elder families, but he could only turn a blind eye to it. In the current situation, explaining too much would only make things worse. He could only gloss it over and swallow this grievance. The focus of this military meeting was to discuss the issue of marching to the Dark Moon. The two defeats of the Magic Shadow Legion and the Nether Hydra Legion had frustrated the morale of the Capital Coalition army. The Dark Moon's morale was at its peak, but this could not offset the disparity in strength between the two sides. The Coalition army was currently in urgent need of a victory to inspire morale. Deputy Commander Jarrett proposed that now that the army had rested and reorganized, they should immediately set off to attack the Dark Moon. Obsidian added, "We either don't move in this battle, or we will sweep the enemy with thunderous momentum once we move." The new Chief Affairs Officer, Josh, stood up and first expressed his approval of the proposal to dispatch the entire army. At the same time, he pointed out that the Dark Moon was cunning and should not be underestimated. They must be mentally prepared to fight a tough battle, so the logistics must be properly prepared and arranged. It was better to have more than less. At present, it would still take a certain amount of time to prepare. Josh's suggestion was to make full preparations before sending troops to destroy the Dark Moon in one fell swoop under the premise of paying the least amount of losses. This experienced and prudent suggestion was echoed by most of the lords, especially with the lesson of the complete annihilation of Solder and Jox. The Dark Moon was definitely a tough opponent. It was impossible to defeat them without breaking a few teeth. Everyone wanted to reduce their own losses. Jarrett thought about it and agreed. Obsidian saw that everyone agreed, so he immediately decided to take a temporary rest and reorganize. After the logistics materials are all in place according to the standards proposed by Josh, the entire army will attack and wipe out the Dark Moon. This intelligence appeared on the table of the Dark Moon Palace Council Hall for the first time. It was surrounded by the main members of the estate who were participating in the meeting. The two great victories against the capital's Magic Shadow Legion and the Nether Hydra Legion excited the Dark Moon soldiers and civilians. Nesta, who surrendered to the Dark Moon, was appointed as the deputy legion commander of the Red Blood Legion to lead the cavalry. Originally, the Dark Moon had 30,000 cavalries. This time, there were 4,700 cavalries who surrendered with Nesta. Together with more than 7,000 Magic Shadow cavalries who were captured in the Moonlight Fortress, there were more than 40,000 cavalries in total. Putting a surrendered general in such an important position showed Jia's extraordinary courage. Nesta was grateful. He made a blood oath in the name of the royal family in front of the Dark Moon's king and ministers never to betray. In addition to boosting morale, the surrender of the capital's famous general also improved Jia's influence to a certain extent. Jia was indeed a very courageous lord, but this appointment had nothing to do with courage because Nesta had already become the puppet of Chenrei's God-eating mask long ago. Originally, there were two puppets of the God-eating mask. One was Brock's capable general, the peak stage of the demon emperor Loki. The other was Kaneda, Alvin, the son of the Red Spirit Lord Josh. Due to the limited number of puppets, when Chenrei turned Nesta into a puppet, he first deprived Kaneda of his life. As for Kaneda, who appeared in front of Seymour later, he was a slime that could transform into any form. In the beginning, the slime pretended to be a lord and was domineering in the Red Spirit estate for a while. Then, he had been following Royce and acting as a bystander. Now, he worked exceptionally hard in front of his master. From the beginning of rushing out to the tragic collapse of being shot by an arrow in the end, every line and every action was on point. He successfully completed the historical mission of Kanita. Those arrows were actually just tickles for Dodo, who had an immortal body. With the obedient puppets and the characters that could transform freely, the Blood Mist Valley was actually a good show to lure the capital army into an ambush. Only the Magic Shadow Legion cavalries were kept in the dark. What Seymour saw outside town Mordo that night was the real Nesta, but the cavalries under his command were the soldiers of the Dark Moon. In the end, Seymour was lured into the Black Mountain Forest, and the 90,000 soldiers and horses that went on the expedition were all wiped out. The indignant Magic Shadow Legion cavalries also truly surrendered to the Dark Moon. In this game, the Red Spirit Lord Josh was the most authentic character. Because of this, he could swagger and give advice in front of Obsidian. If he was a puppet or a fake, perhaps he couldn't hide from the capital's powerhouse. As early as after the War of Lords, Josh, who was seriously injured, was imprisoned. Dodo pretended to be Josh, and he used Kanita's fake rebellion to eradicate Josh's confidence. He also supported Royce and the others to take over. Without arousing the capital's suspicion, he successfully took full control of the Red Spirit's situation. In order to save his life, Josh chose to surrender and become Chinray's servant. He also accepted a chronic toxin from Paglio, which allowed him to return to the position of Lord. In fact, he was a puppet controlled by the Dark Moon. Jia had occupied 3 of the Empire's 4 major estates. In the capital's crusade against the Dark Moon this time, Josh became the most important chess piece. He used Kanita's death to get an important position, and he plotted against Zeta, further deepening the conflict between the elder families and Obsidian. At present, Josh's main task was still to lurk. This chess piece would not be moved easily until the most critical time. Chinray stays. The rest of you can leave. Jia looked at the latest intel and said faintly. Everyone got up and retreated. Isabella's beautiful eyes behind the veil glanced at Jia faintly. She paused on Chinray's face for a moment, then she left. Chapter 504. Only Jia and Chinray were left in the council hall. When are you leaving? Rala's teleportation circle has been improved some time ago, so it will be tomorrow at the earliest for it to be restored to normal use. If someone heard the conversation, they would be surprised. At the most critical moment when the capital army is about to attack, the financial officer, one of the iconic figures of the Dark Moon, actually wants to escape. However, Jia did not show any special expression. She just nodded slightly. Be careful. After these 2 sentences, there was a moment of silence. Chinray tried to speak a few times, but Jia didn't respond. The atmosphere became a little awkward. Since the last birthday incident, although Aguil was announced as the fiancé, the poor fiancé had been unable to get close to her due to the embarrassment and annoyance of a certain royal highness. The benefits and treatment are not as good as before the birthday. Farewell is imminent, at least have a goodbye kiss or something. By the way, I haven't tasted Princess Royal Highness cherry lips for a long time. Just as Chinray was thinking about how to succeed, Jia suddenly made up her mind and said, Tonight stay. Chinray's eyes suddenly widened. He thought he heard it wrong. It was like buying a lottery ticket. Initially, I just wanted to win the 2nd or 3rd prize, but I didn't expect to win the 1st prize? Is this the strong rebound after my character hit the bottom? Chinray glanced at Princess Royal Highness in surprise and happened to meet her gaze. Jia looked away and didn't look at him, but there was a faint blush on her face. Although it was only for a moment, Chinray had already seen many things contained in those purple eyes, and he walked over slowly. Jia felt the approach of the man, and her whole body was a little tense, but she did not flinch. My dear Royal Highness, this won't work. Chinray's voice startled Jia. She looked at him in surprise. When did the wolf become a vegetarian? You should dress more sexily and have a more charming expression. Then, you should say sweetly, "Please pamper me tonight, Lord Husband," Chenrei said with a serious expression. "Maybe I'll consider staying." "Bastard! Bastard!" Jia's expression instantly became interesting. Her whole body was full of chills. She gritted her teeth and punched the hateful guy. This punch was caught by Chenrei at lightning speed. Then, with a pull, Princess Royal's entire body fell into his arms. "Damn it! Let me go!" Jia struggled angrily, but she didn't have enough strength to break free. She immediately bit him on the shoulder. "Ouch! My hand! When did the Lucifer royal family have the bloodline talent of biting people? Help!" The shrill screams in the council hall faintly reached the ears of the Imperial Guards in the distance. The Imperial Guards, who were accustomed to it, looked down and turned a deaf ear. The struggle in the man's arms gradually subsided, but a few neat teeth marks on his body were particularly eye-catching. "Dear Princess Royal Highness, have you calmed down? I'm almost bitten to death by you." "Bastard! Damn guy!" the woman cursed vaguely. She even bit the back of his hand. Chenrei smiled and enjoyed the wonderful feeling of Princess Royal Highness's two plump and warm breasts squeezing on his chest. "Should I add an idiot who doesn't know how to flirt? Let me guess again. In addition to giving herself to me, does my Jia Royal Highness have such an arrangement? If the war situation is critical, let me take her sister and those friends to escape from the dark moon from the west? And she stays to live and die with the estate?" Jia trembled slightly. She gently loosened her teeth, revealing two symmetrical crescent marks on the back of someone's hand. "Sure enough, you're still the same stupid woman as before." Chenrei gently stroked the soft blonde hair. "It's just that the same trick is useless against me. I won't make the same mistake again. No matter what method you use, I will be with you. It will be the same now and in the future." Jia didn't speak, but her forehead leaned tightly on his shoulder. "Jia, do you have so little confidence in me? Or do you have no confidence in yourself?" "I don't know." Jia sighed softly. "Are you sure about this war?" "To be honest, I'm not sure either." Chenrei shook his head. "Since coming to this world, I have encountered a lot of tests. None of them were certain, but I finally made it through because I know that I have to do it. I understand this truth, I'm just don't believe me. Just a little hesitation, or a little fear. No. Before Princess Royal Highness had time to explain, her mouth had been blocked, and a certain guy took the opportunity to collect the fragrant lips that had not been seen for a long time. After a fierce entanglement for a while, the lips of the two separated. Chenrei pressed her forehead and said softly, "Jia, listen to me, we will win the final victory, just like we will be together forever, as long as we have this persistence. Do you have it?" Jia's closed eyes slowly opened, her purple eyes were covered with a layer of faint water mist, and the corners of her eyes flashed faintly. "Yes." Chenrei held her face and kissed her forehead. "My dream is to have a wonderful night with my princess, no, many wonderful nights, when our persistence becomes a reality, but not now. Tell me, my woman, will this dream come true?" "Yes." Jia hugged his neck tightly, and the little hesitation hidden in her eyes had disappeared, replaced by a look that was not there before, full of affection and persistence. For a long time. A persistent person shouldn't say one thing and mean another, right? The thief's hand that slipped into her buttocks was pressed down, and then Princess Royal Highness took a few steps back and pulled away from the man who said one thing and meant one thing. It's just an instinctive reaction. Although today, but you will be my woman sooner or later, now I'm just collecting some interest. You seem to have got one thing wrong." Jiao's mouth curled into a slightly arrogant smile. "You're just a husband who marries into my family. Even after the marriage, all the initiative and decision-making power are in my hands. Without my permission you can't do anything. I seem to have made a stupid decision just now, can I regret it now?" Chenrei's face was full of regret. "There is no medicine for regret in the world," even if you are the inheritor of the pharmacist's Grand Master. Jiao's eyes suddenly flashed an extremely rare mischievous look. However, there is always a chance. Next time you should dress more sexily, look more charming, and then say sweetly, "Please pamper me tonight, Princess Royal Highness. Maybe I will consider letting you stay." This time, it was Qinrui's turn to have a wonderful expression. However, Princess Royal Highness still underestimated the shamelessness of men. A certain guy pulled his neckline to his shoulders and threw a self-proclaimed charming look. "Please pamper me tonight, Princess Royal Highness." Princess Royal Highness, who felt creepy, burned with a terrible aura. She gritted her teeth and spat out a word. "Get out!" After a certain someone was driven out of the palace, he looked dejected. Impulsiveness was really the devil. In a moment of impulse, he gave up the delicious meal that was delivered to his door. Now he couldn't go back even if he wanted to. "Are you depressed, Sir Financial Officer?" A charming voice sounded in the shadow of the trees in the alley. Qinrui had long discovered the owner of the voice and shrugged. "Fortunately, for a person who is often depressed, it's within the range of tolerance. That is to say, everything is under control." "Really? What a self-comforting man. But my grasp of the situation is not as good as yours. I originally expected that you would come out very late tonight." This prediction almost came true. Qinrui secretly muttered. "So, do you want me to send you home, beautiful lady?" The charming voice seemed to chuckle. "I don't like to hold a man's hand, with another woman's teeth marks on the back of his hand. Maybe I should compete with him some other day to see if I can bite deeper than him?" Qinrui smiled bitterly. Under this hazy moonlight, she actually found this. She deserved to be the head of intelligence. It would be impossible to do this without keen observation. "Let me guess, did our Princess Royal Highness refuse the little attempt of a certain eager man, so this person left the palace dejectedly? I didn't guess correctly at the beginning, but the end is really right. A woman's intuition is really terrifying." Qinrui scratched his head. "I'm leaving tomorrow morning. Do you need me to bring back some gifts such as specialties?" "Of course. It's just that it's a gift that I like. It's not easy." A graceful figure walked out of the shadows. "Can you get through this crisis safely and in one piece?" Qinrui was startled. He had just encouraged others in the palace, but was immediately encouraged after leaving the palace. He felt warm in his heart and shrugged. "I'll do my best." "You must do it." The attractive figure slowly leaned over, wrapped around his body like a snake, and dragged him into the shadow of the tree. After a moment of intertwining lips and tongues, the charming voice sounded again. "Compared to her, who is better?" This question was a bit difficult, so he could only vaguely answer it. "Both are good." The woman snorted coldly. She boldly grabbed his hand and put it into her brow. She held her white jade. "What about here?" It was the first time between the two of them had such intimate contact, especially when the woman took the initiative. Some of the desires that a certain someone had calmed down in the palace suddenly flourished, using the action of mastering to replace the answer. The woman let him do whatever he wanted, panting softly, and smiled sweetly. "I'm not like some princesses who make empty promises. As long as you can bring back that gift, I can do whatever you want." As soon as she finished speaking, her delicate body had already slipped out of the man's grasp. When she left, she did not forget to flick a high weapon. "Not now, let's talk about it when you bring back the gift." "Well, you should go back, there are people waiting at home, fickle man." When she said the last two words, she was already a few meters away, leaving a certain man holding his lower body with a sullen face. "Sure enough, I'm being teased again, siren. She's almost as good as Kia." If the little demon girl was said to be a cute, pretty girl from a humble family, who would occasionally come up with small schemes, then this big demon girl was a lady from a wealthy family, who was good at using overt schemes, making people's hearts itch. Both of them had their own advantages. "I'd better go back. I originally wanted to have a good time with the three women at home tonight. This trip will not be back for a while, and if it goes well, it is likely to change the whole situation. Chapter 505. Have you heard? Royal Highness Regent's army suffered 2 consecutive defeats in the Dark Moon. I also heard that General Seymour of the Nether Hydra Legion was killed in battle, and General Nesta of the Magic Shadow Legion surrendered to the enemy. General Nesta surrendered to the enemy because of Seymour's personal revenge, okay? General Nesta defended the Blood Mist Valley for dozens of days. As a result, when Seymour came to the valley, not only did he not reinforce, but he also wanted to destroy the Magic Shadow Legion. He also killed Kanita, the heir of the Red Spirit Estate. General Nesta defected to the Dark Moon in anger. What is this? The demon overlord elder of the Cayman family, Zeta, was killed when he returned to the Red Spirit Estate after being released by the Dark Moon. Do you know who did it? It is said that the regent is trying to deal with the elder families. Keep your voice down. Who doesn't know about this in the capital now? Shinrui sat in the tavern in the northern suburbs of the capital, drinking while listening to the discussions around him calmly. After experiencing the last setback, the rebuilt Dark Demon was more capable. In the shortest time, the war at the front, including some inside stories, had spread quickly in every corner of the capital. It only took a few hours from the teleportation entrance of the Dark Moon residence to the Rainbow Valley and then to the capital. Chunrui did not enter the capital, but he got on the carriage at the outskirts of the city and headed north toward the White Feather Estate. The lord of the White Feather Estate, Sikali, was of the Lucifer royal family. His ancestors also had the royal bloodline. Because he was a concubine, he was enfeoffed to the White Feather Estate. After several generations of management, annexation, development, and reclamation of wasteland, his strength gradually grew and became one of the 4 major estates of the fallen angel empire. Among the lords, Sikali was the one who was the best at dealing with both sides. This time, the coalition army also sent some soldiers for this expedition. It seemed a little perfunctory, but he focused his energy on the dispute with General George of the Warlock Fortress. Obsidian desperately sent troops to crusade against the Dark Moon. As Jia's strongest supporter, the first general of the empire, George would definitely not sit idly by. The meaning of Sikali's conflict with George at this time was self-evident. In a sense, once the Dark Moon was destroyed by Obsidian, Sikali's credit was still above most of the lords who followed him to the expedition. After helping his father-in-law at the Warlock Fortress the last time, Shinrui returned to the Dark Moon via the capital and the Red Spirit Estate. He was in a hurry to rush back at that time, so he did not pay attention to many things. Now that he made a special trip to the White Feather Estate, the experiences and observations along the way made him have a better understanding of this relatively low-key estate. The area of the White Feather Estate was slightly smaller than the Dark Moon, but it was larger than the Red Spirit Estate. Although there were no very conspicuous and rich towns like Town Mordo and Town Moling in the Red Spirit Estate, the population was more widely distributed, and the development was more balanced. From the comprehensive analysis of various intelligence reflected by the Dark Demon, the combat power of the White Feather Estate was by no means inferior to the Red Spirit Estate. The reason for the conflict between the White Feather Estate and the Warlock Fortress this time was the military provisions. The military provisions of the Warlock Fortress were jointly provided by the capital and the White Feather Estate. Due to the influence of the capital's fundraising scandal, the original military pay and military provisions and other materials had been greatly reduced. This time, the White Feather Estate had been delaying the supply of military provisions with the excuse of poor harvest, causing the Warlock Fortress soldiers who couldn't hold back to loot several towns in the north of the White Feather Estate. This made the people of the White Feather Estate very angry. Lord Sikali of the White Feather Estate publicly condemned the Warlock Fortress garrison and asked General George to hand over the soldiers who had committed evil deeds. General George refused to admit that the looting was done by the Warlock Fortress garrison. Taking town Black Cloud, which was the closest to the north of the Warlock Fortress, as an example, he pointed out that Sikali was purely self-directed. While delaying the supply of military supplies, he deliberately used this to please the capital's regent Obsidian. Both sides insisted on their own words, and the confrontation was in a stalemate. It was just that the people in the White Feather Estate had a blind faith in Sikali, especially the few towns that suffered from it. They did not believe General George's explanation at all. They showed extreme hostility to the Warlock Fortress and supported Sikali against General George. Now, Sikali had sent a large number of troops in the estate to the northern towns to protect the townspeople from being plundered. In Chinray's view, this matter was already obvious. As General George said, Sikali was simply deliberately looking for an excuse to cause trouble to delay General George when Obsidian was crusading against the Dark Moon. Chinray went all the way north and came to the core of the estate, the White Feather City. The area of the White Feather City was very large. It was not even smaller than the Dark Moon. It could be seen that it had been painstakingly built. Like the counterfeit versions of many places in the Demon Realm, many buildings and facilities had the shadow of the Dark Moon. For example, the newly built Battle Ball Arena in front of him had ticket sales, gambling ticket sales, fan shops, etc. It was simply a complete plagiarism. Judging from the audience, the ball market was quite popular. "Great, I heard that Sir Lord will play in person this time. The tickets were sold out early in the morning. He will suppress his strength to the level of intermediate demon and lead the civilian team to compete with the strongest Snow Feather Army team. All the income from tickets and gambling will be donated to those children and the weak in need." "Humph. Sir Lord is too kind. Those weak people are not worthy of sympathy at all." "Kind? 5 years ago, there were horse bandits who burned and looted the town of Massimo. The Lord was furious and led his army to kill 3,600 horse bandits by himself. Their heads were hung high in the town of Massimo and piled up into a small mountain. So far, there has been no news of the horse bandits. Sir Sikali is the most benevolent and powerful lord. As long as he is here, our White Feather Estate will definitely become the richest and most prosperous estate in the entire empire, and even the entire Demon Realm. It will far surpass the Dark Moon." "Humph. What is the Dark Moon? Didn't Princess Jia often come to the White Feather Estate to ask for help?" Sir Sikali was generous every time. However, when Sir Sikali went to visit the Dark Moon not long ago, Princess Jia actually turned her back on him. She is extremely stingy. She deserves to be punished by the capital this time. Chinray frowned as he listened. Judging from the hearsay along the way, Sikali's prestige in the White Feather Estate has reached an unimaginable level. Although this Sir Lord is a two-faced fence-sitter outside, in the estate, he is a perfect godlike existence. The people have a kind of almost blind worship. No wonder almost all the people in the estate showed strong hostility to General George and the Warlock Fortress as soon as he gave an order. Regardless of whether Sikali is a great lord who serves the people, it is indeed not easy to reach this level. Chinray's original intention was to go to the Warlock Fortress first, but now he had a lot of curiosity about the White Feather Estate lord who had been somewhat contemptuous before. After thinking about it, he bought a ticket from a scalper at a high price and followed the crowd into the arena. Nowadays, the battle ball had faintly replaced the traditional fighting as the #1 sport in the Demon Realm. Many people also listed the battle ball and fighting as the two major sports because one was a collective while the other was an individual, so there was no conflict. The arena was crowded. With the appearance of Sikali's team, the atmosphere reached a climax. The audience shouted the name of the Lord in unison. Every time he touched the ball, it could cause deafening cheers. Driven by this atmosphere, almost everyone in the arena and the audience showed excitement as if they were injected with chicken blood. This state was no longer facing a lord or a star player, but it was as if fanatics were looking up to their god to show miracles. This kind of fanaticism that could be called terrifying made Chinray secretly shocked. Jia's prestige in the Dark Moon was already quite strong, but it was far less than Sikali's influence in the White Feather Estate. He had no doubt that as long as Sikali raised his arm, not only the army, but most of the people in the estate would not hesitate to point their fists and knives at anyone, including the capital. This made Chinrei couldn't help but think of a certain Sir Ruler of the Third Reich, in the history of another world. Chinrei's mind moved. He didn't continue to watch and stood up. In the deafening cheers, the first half of the game was over. The score was 4-3, and the civilian team was 1 goal ahead. Although Sikali was very strong, the battle ball was not a one-man sport. Moreover, the Snow Feather Legion's elites also did their best without reservation under Sikali's prior order, making this contest more real and intense. The audience's reaction was also more explosive. In the players' lounge, the team doctor took the time to treat individual injured people. After Sikali, who was also the coach, ignited the morale of his teammates to the highest point with a few words, he began to arrange the offensive and defensive tactics for the second half. Suddenly, Sikali's voice paused, signaling the players to leave first. Although the players were a little surprised, they did not ask much. They all retreated, leaving only Sikali in the lounge. "Come out," Sikali said faintly. Chinrei's figure slowly appeared from the shadow in the corner. He learned this lurking technique from Ms. Intelligence. He could hide his breath and figure. So many people just now, but he didn't discover it. He didn't expect it was actually seen through by Sikali. In fact, Chinrei's mind was shaken just now. He could no longer maintain the best state of being in harmony with the environment. In a fleeting moment, he revealed a slight flaw, but it was noticed by Sikali. Sikali's keen senses were evident. The reason why Chinrei's mind was shaken was because of Sikali's information in the analytical eyes. Race, pride, royal family, mutated. Comprehensive strength assessment, EA. Physique, EA. Strength, EA. Spirit, EA+, agility, EA. Analysis, dark attribute. Due to the need of the game, his strength on the surface was suppressed to the intermediate demon level, but the data of the intermediate stage of the Demon Emperor was completely different from Sikali, who visited the Dark Moon Estate last time. At that time, Sikali's true strength was displayed as A+, which was the peak stage of the Demon Emperor. The analytical eyes will not make a mistake. In this case, the Sikali in front of me is probably not the real Sikali. A substitute, and he is even the intermediate stage of the Demon Emperor. After realizing that Sikali was probably just a substitute, Chinrei's mind turned quickly. He had cancelled the original beheading operation, and a new plan prototype quickly appeared in his mind. Chapter 506. Sir Lord's strength is really admirable. I just deliberately leaked a trace of breath, and I was discovered. Chinrei walked out slowly. Of course, he was now using an unfamiliar face. Sikali intuitively felt that the strength of this mysterious man did not seem to be inferior to him. He secretly condensed his power and prepared to activate a special magic circle in the lounge. He asked, "Who are you?" "Sir doesn't need to activate that teleportation magic circle. I have already changed its attributes long ago. If you move rashly, I'm afraid there will be unimaginable consequences." These words made Sikali frown. He just sent out those players just now to prevent the magic circle from being interfered with. Now that the other party exposed it, he did not hesitate to exert his power. Sure enough, the magic circle did not react at all. Sikali was really taken aback. He didn't expect this person to really change the magic circle silently. He didn't dare to move for a while. In fact, due to time constraints, Chinrei only had time to do a little trick. If Sikali didn't believe it and tried a few more times, he would be exposed. "Please rest assured, sir, I have absolutely no malice." Chinrei did not give Sikali more time to react or experiment. He bowed and said, "My name is Fako. I came from afar to visit Sir Sikali. Because I am a more impatient person, so I chose a more presumptuous way. In order to express my apology, here is a trivial gift. Please accept it, sir." A space ring appeared in Chinrei's hand. He controlled the soft power and slowly flew towards Sikali. Sikali vigilantly sensed the state of the ring. After confirming that there was no abnormality, he took it and probed it. He was slightly moved. Although I don't know Sir's real intention, I can't think of a reason to refuse immediately for this unimaginably generous gift. If I really want to say what my intention is, it is to leave a little impression in Sir's heart in a different way." The smile on Chenray's face was even brighter. "If Sir can forgive me for coming uninvited today, I will go to the city lord's mansion to visit Sir according to formal etiquette at a time that is not presumptuous as the beginning of a precious friendship." "Sir's intention is just a little impression?" Sikali shook his head. "No, Sir Fako's generosity and courage impressed me too deeply." Chenray muttered in his mind as he calmly said, "I won't ask how many people before me have left a deep impression in front of the liege. I only want to say that I will be the most courageous one." "Oh?" Sikali finally showed a smile on his face. "Then I look forward to Sir Fako's official visit. I can guarantee that you won't be disappointed." Chenray bowed slightly and walked toward the door. When he passed by Sikali, it seemed that the door was wide open and unguarded, but Sikali just kept smiling. His eyes flashed, but he didn't make a move. It was not until he watched Chenray open the door and leave that his smiling eyes became deep. The conversation between the two just now seemed friendly and smooth. If Fako was just a weak person with poor strength, he would have been killed or captured by Sikali for interrogation. The basis of an equal conversation was strength. What puzzled Sikali was that this uninvited guest had been feigning politeness with him for so long, but he didn't show any real intentions. But the wealth in the space ring was real without any falsehood. "Is it really for a little impression?" Sikali sneered and shook his head. "If you want to take, give first. Without greater benefits, it is impossible for the other party to pay such a large amount of wealth out of thin air. Speaking of which, this impression was really deep. Before Fako, there was also a powerful organization that left a deep impression on Sikali. Could it be, in any case, before I still have a huge use value, this Fako should not be too dangerous. At least the possibility of an assassin can be ruled out. Otherwise, he would not have made such a move just now." Sikali made a conclusion in his heart. He happened to hear the lively shouts of Sir Lord outside. He snorted and walked toward the arena. Chenray didn't know Sikali's thoughts. His actions just now were more of quick-wittedness and adaptability. The real plan still needed more detailed consideration and more comprehensive intelligence. If there was plenty of time at hand, he could slowly plan, but the current time was very tight. He must use certain planning methods to maximize efficiency. After leaving the arena, Chenray found the Dark Demon's stronghold in the White Feather Estate. After making some arrangements, he did not stay in the White Feather City. He got on the griffin that the Dark Demon got on the outskirts of the city and flew north. This griffin was a mutated bloodline with particularly strong endurance. Chenray used analytical eyes to encourage the griffin to hurry at full speed while thinking about the plan in his mind. With the help of the magic map, it took only 3 days to reach Town Ista in the north of the White Feather Estate. This was the closest town to the south of the Warlock Fortress, and it was also the main victim area of looting. A large number of the White Feather Estate's defense troops were stationed here. Together with the 2 nearby towns, the total number actually exceeded 100,000. In Town Ista, Chenray heard rumors about the various atrocities of the Warlock Fortress garrison, including looting property and food, raping women, killing rebels, etc. Everyone showed strong indignation. Now that the White Feather Estate's defense army was stationed, sure enough, the Warlock Fortress garrison did not dare to invade. Facing the 100,000 White Feather Estate army, General George of the Warlock Fortress did not dare to slack off. He sent the Red Dragon Legion's deputy legion leader and capable general, Francis, to lead the army to build outposts, fortresses, and other fortifications in the Britchek Canyon north of Town Ista. He was ready to respond. After learning these news, Chenray quietly passed through Town Ista and continued to head north. He came to the Britchek Canyon area. "Who are you?" Faced with the stranger who suddenly appeared at the forward outpost, the guards of the Red Dragon Legion looked as if they were facing a great enemy. This person could pass through the magic traps and the eyes and ears of the scouts without a sound. He was definitely not an ordinary enemy. Please don't get me wrong, I'm an old friend of General Francis. Please send someone to inform the general that the quartermaster who once held the lion's teeth in the Weiju Valley that day has come. He has urgent military affairs to see the general. Back then, Chunrei rescued Francis alone in the Weiju Valley and led the remaining soldiers to ambush the Bloody Empire's ambush. He captured the demon Emperor Pamir alive and severely injured the Bloody Empire's main generals, Byaboa and Misek. At that time, he used the identity of the quartermaster who didn't want to be named. The captain of the guards saw that this guy in a cloak did not seem to be malicious. Otherwise, it was not difficult to destroy this outpost with the opponent's strength to come here without alerting any defense. He immediately ordered a scout to go to the canyon. At the same time, he secretly launched a warning magic message to inform the other outposts to be fully prepared. Chunrei saw it and did not stop it. Soon after, the captain was surprised to see the deputy legion leader, Francis, personally rushing over with a team of people. When Chunrei took off the cloak on his head and revealed the face that Francis had seen that day, Francis took 2 steps forward in surprise and joy. He saluted first. "We meet again, Sir Quartermaster!" Francis was the Lucifer royal family, the deputy legion leader of the Red Dragon Legion, and the beloved general of General George. Now, he actually saluted this little quartermaster. Many of the soldiers brought by Francis had participated in the Battle of the Weiju Valley that day. They showed sincere respect to Chunrei one after another. This made the captain and soldiers at the side of the outpost dumbfounded. Chunrei returned the salute, stepped forward and gave Francis a hug. He went straight to the point and said his intention. "I have urgent matters to see General George. I'll go with you right away." Francis knew that Chunrei's identity was not simple. He was also awarded the lion-toothed sword by General George. He was definitely the most trusted person of the general, so he immediately agreed. The two returned to the fortress in the canyon, rode 2 fast horses, and quickly rushed to the Warlock fortress. General George had already received Francis' message in advance, and he welcomed Chunrei into the command center of the fortress as soon as possible. "General George, Madame Gloria." There were no outsiders present. Chunrei restored his original appearance and saluted his father-in-law and Madame Red Dragon. After not seeing him for a long time, General George's eyebrows looked a little more haggard. Even Gloria, who had always been generous and beautiful, looked worried. George did not beat around the bush and asked directly, "Chunrei, how is the battle situation of the Dark Moon? Are you here to ask for help from the Warlock fortress this time?" Before Chunrei could speak, Gloria shouted angrily, "Obsidian, that shameless bastard, if he dares to hurt my precious daughter, Athena, I will lead the Red Dragon Legion to flatten the capital." "Madam, don't worry. When I left, the situation of the Dark Moon was still stable. Before that, we also severely damaged Obsidian's morale." Chunrei explained the situation of the Dark Moon's 2 victories. George nodded slightly, and Gloria even clapped her hands happily. "Chunrei, you are really something. Our Athena did not misjudge you. After learning that Obsidian personally went to the Dark Moon, I wanted to reinforce you several times, but George just wouldn't let me. It's not that I won't let you, but I can't move." George shook his head. "At present, the 100,000 troops of the White Feather Estate are approaching the fortress covetously. Not to mention that, the more important thing is that the Iron Fist Estate of the Bloody Empire has also begun to gather a large number of troops. Despite the so-called alliance agreement, the Bloody Empire has been coveting our empire for a long time, especially in the current situation. We must not ignore the possibility that they will tear up the agreement and march to invade. Once it really happens, the Warlock fortress will face the danger of being attacked from both sides. Once the fortress is lost, not only our army may be wiped out, but the Bloody Empire will also march straight in, threatening the safety of the entire fallen Angel Empire, so we can't act rashly at this time." Only then did Chunrei know that the situation of the Warlock fortress had reached such a serious level. He was silent in thought. "Chunrei, Although you have won 2 small victories, it is not a serious injury for Obsidian's millions of troops. The real test is yet to come. In the current situation, I can't provide you with more substantial help. You can only rely on yourself. I know. Chunrei nodded. General, please rest assured. I can promise with my life that even if the Dark Moon is eventually defeated, I will protect the safety of Athena. George and Gloria looked at each other, and both of them revealed gratified expressions. By the way, General, is the shortage of food in the Warlock Fortress very serious? George sighed. It is indeed very serious. Chapter 507. Dark Moon Estate Border. Moonlight Fortress. The Capital Coalition army looked at this fortress that had existed since the era of the Lord of Midnight Sun from a distance. What is the concept of 1,000,000 troops? Standing on the fortress and looking into the distance, what came into view was a dense black phalanx that covered the mountains and plains. There was almost no end to it. Even though the Moonlight Fortress garrison was well trained and their number had greatly increased, facing the enemy that was dozens of times their own, they couldn't help but feel numb. If the enemy was allowed to crush them with all their strength, perhaps the Dark Moon army would not even be left. The enemy had not attacked yet, but almost every Dark Moon garrison had a heavy heart. Their palms were sweating like a bow that was getting tighter and tighter under huge pressure. It was in danger of collapsing at any time. Of course, there were also individual exceptions, such as a flat-chested lady in black standing on the highest observation platform. A lot of money! The girl looked at the endless enemies and thought of the price that the employer had promised to eliminate the enemies. It was as if she saw countless black crystal coins all over the ground. Her eyes were glowing green. If I fly over and launch a few black dragon cannons at the crowd, will I make a lot of money? No, Oliphius, this kind of battlefield is not trivial. Don't underestimate the power of the real elite army. The one who spoke was the chief commander this time, Athena. If you really want to do this, then even if you earn a little money, you won't have the life to enjoy it. There is actually such a thing? Oliphius was taken aback. I can't even deal with these ordinary people? Not exactly. A cold voice sounded. It was Loki. He was once Brock's most powerful subordinate, and the deputy legion leader of the Shadow Empire's Jurgle fortress. Loki was very experienced in fortress defense, so he became the advisor of this defense. Athena was taught by her father, General George. She was originally a master of defense and preparation. With Loki's assistance, this time it was considered the strongest command lineup of the Dark Moon. It's fine if it's an ordinary territory's army, but most of the Empire's elite armies have a way to deal with experts, which is to activate special magic tattoos and expend their life potential to cast some kind of special combined magic array. This kind of magic circle can restrain and delay high-level powerhouses. The more people, the greater the power. Once Madame Oliphius is restrained, and a demon overlord with the same strength as Madame attacks from the side, then Madame is likely to be in danger. Nesta added, this method is not omnipotent. There are also great restrictions. For example, the last time the Magic Shadow Legion was ambushed and the Nether Hydra Legion was attacked by fire, they were still annihilated. In fact, this is an imitation of the battle tactics of the surface world. The combat power of humans in the surface world is generally lower than us demons, and the same is true for the high-level powerhouses. However, their battle formations are very mysterious and much stronger than those in the demon world. Sometimes, they can even exert several times more offensive and defensive power. Every time we fight with humans, we suffer a lot in this aspect. Later, the demon realm also began to study this kind of formation, such as the Magic Shadow Charge of my Magic Shadow Legion. Although the demon realm is also slightly successful in this aspect, it is still far inferior to the level of the human world. Only some truly elite legions have the ability to compete with the powerhouses. The powerhouses in the Capital Coalition army are also unwilling to advance rashly. They are also afraid of being restrained and attacked. For example, if the enemy has a peak stage of the demon overlord, even if Paglio is not here, as long as this demon overlord is restrained by the magic circle or our army, even Oliphius can severely injure or even kill the opponent. Athena actually didn't say one more sentence. The high-level powerhouses were rare resources, and they would never be easily used as cannon fodder. The more critical the chess piece, the more it should be used at the critical moment. Oliphius nodded without understanding, but the people next to her understood that this scale and level of war was no longer something that one or two powerhouses could easily kill the enemies and dominate the entire battle situation. Of course, the powerhouses were still the powerhouses. If they were dispatched at the most suitable opportunity, they could still play a huge role and even reverse the battle situation. This was undeniable. Since the terrain in front of the Moonlight Fortress was not completely flat, the capital army was not in a hurry to attack. They were still further adjusting the formation to facilitate a large-scale attack. Having more people was an advantage, but on the other hand, it was also more difficult to command, especially the armies of the lords. The front army commander, Geraint, quickly commanded through the messenger. Right-wing formation, move faster. Front army ordnance brigade, measure the distance immediately and prepare to set up the magic crystal cannon. Goblin Legion, assemble and inspect the catapult. Just as the coalition army began to set up the magic crystal cannon, several clusters of red light suddenly ejected from the Moonlight Fortress wall, then the ground began to tremble violently. Boom, boom, boom! Some of the catapults and magic crystal cannons in the front row that had not been completely set up were torn apart under the impact of this terrifying power. Not only that, there were several huge holes in the front army's phalanx in an instant. At least 2,000 people were killed in this round of bombardment. The Dark Moon's magic crystal cannon. Geraint was taken aback. The range is so far. The power is so fierce. What kind of magic crystal cannon is this? The magic crystal cannon brought by the capital is already the most advanced in the current demon realm. It has also been improved by the mechanic master. The purpose of setting it up in this position is to take advantage of the range advantage to launch an initial bombardment on the Moonlight Fortress. I didn't expect this advantage to become a disadvantage in the face of the Dark Moon's magic crystal cannon. Where did the Dark Moon get such a terrifying weapon? The phalanx that was hit was stunned by this round of magic crystal cannon bombardment. After they reacted, they were in a mess. Front army, retreat 100 meters immediately. Maintain the formation. Don't panic. Geraint shouted loudly, and the messenger began to beat the drum to command. It was just that many of the front army were the Lord's armies, which were far less well-trained than the capital legion. Especially when the second round of magic crystal cannon bombardment of the Moonlight Fortress began, they only knew to retreat desperately. The army at the back could not retreat in time, and they were squeezed and trampled on each other. If it weren't for Geraint's prompt decision to order the law enforcement team to kill some of the chaotic soldiers, the front army's phalanx would almost collapse. In contrast, the capital's direct legion was much calmer. They maintained the formation and finally retreated to a safe position. The second round of magic crystal cannon bombardment raised the depressed morale of the Dark Moon again. There were sounds of excitement coming from the Moonlight Fortress. Now you know the power of the Dark Moon! Look at the silly look of these capital's grandsons. General is right. They are just a bunch of mobs. What's the use of having more people? Seeing that the soldiers were reinvigorated, Athena and the generals were slightly relieved, but they did not dare to relax at all. The magic crystal cannon was not omnipotent. Its range was relatively fixed, especially it could not attack enemies at close range. Although this improved magic crystal cannon was powerful, its cooldown time was longer, which meant that it could not launch effective attacks continuously. In the middle army tent on the hillside, Obsidian frowned when he saw this scene from a distance. The power of the Dark Moon's magic crystal cannon was unexpected, but most of these lost troops were the Lord's coalition army. They were originally used as cannon fodder in the plan. After finally rearranging the formation, Geraint knew that his side's morale was dampened. It was obviously impossible to use the strategy of using the magic crystal cannon to give the opponent a head-on blow. However, the whole battle had only just begun. Geraint condensed his power and shouted, "Do you see the small fortress opposite? Do you see those weak walls? The Dark Moon's rebels are cowering and shivering behind. They can only cower because in the face of our absolute strength, any conspiracy is just a helpless trick. We only need to step on it once, and we can raze this fortress to the ground. Soldiers of the coalition army, tell the Royal Highness Regent who is watching us from behind, can you flatten this small fortress?" Yes. 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 The morale of the front army that had just been frustrated became high again under the encouragement of Geraint. They all stepped on the ground with their feet and hit the shield with their weapons. The momentum resounded throughout the battlefield. It was very amazing. Obsidian showed an admiring expression and nodded slightly. This momentum brought a lot of shock to the defenders of the Moonlight Fortress, but soon, a louder and more strange sound sounded in the Moonlight Fortress. The barking of the hellhound. A dog barking? The soldiers on both sides were stunned at the same time. What is this? Listening carefully, this kind of barking is a bit vague. It seems to be mixed with voices. Everyone can hear that it is actually Geraint's morale-boosting words just now. The rhythm and tone are simply lifelike. A dog that can bite doesn't bark. Warriors of the Dark Moon, will we be afraid of these dogs that can only bark? After the dog barked, a man's voice roared. Not afraid. Amidst the laughter, a more orderly voice came from the Moonlight Fortress. A smile appeared on Athena's face. Lomont is really skilled. His jesting and nonsense actually offset the enemy's momentum. Geraint was furious in his heart, but his face remained cold. He gave the order to attack. The first army formation and the second army formation change into columns and attack. Keep the distance. Don't be afraid of the opponent's magic crystal cannon. As long as you rush out of the range, the magic crystal cannon will be useless. Only by moving forward will there be a way to survive. There is credit. There is reward. There is only a dead end if you retreat. Law enforcement team, attention. Those who retreat after the battle will be beheaded. The establishment of the First Army Formation and the Second Army Formation were all lords' armies. Several lords knew that they were cannon fodder, but they were helpless. Geraint ordered that those who were afraid to fight would be beheaded. Moreover, Regent Obsidian was watching from behind, so they could only grit their teeth and lead the army to charge forward. The soldiers did not feel particularly afraid. Whether it was humans or demons, when they were integrated into a huge team, they were easily infected by the atmosphere. Especially under the encouragement of incitement, they would have a feeling of invincibility. This was the morale. Kill. The two phalanxes scattered into several columns. In the surging dust, they shouted and rushed toward the Moonlight Fortress. It has begun. As Obsidian said, there was a bit of eagerness in his seemingly calm eyes. As long as the Dark Moon was destroyed in one fell swoop, not only could he remove the biggest future trouble, but he could also solve the previous dilemma. It has finally begun. In the palace of the Dark Moon City, Jia also said while quietly watching the crystal ball. Number 1 Magic Crystal Cannon Team 1, launch! Number 1 Magic Crystal Cannon Team 2, launch! Under Athena's order, several light balls were shot out in batches and landed on the battlefield. Countless exaggerated pits appeared. The soldiers within the range of the light balls were instantly blown into powder. There were also many people with broken limbs nearby. It was a tragic sight. However, the rest of the people were still fiercely advancing in the battle cries. Due to the scattered formation, the loss was much lower than before. The stronger the magic crystal cannon, the longer the cooldown time. Geraint calculated the cooldown time of the magic crystal cannon of the Moonlight Fortress from the previous 2 launches. Now that the opponent's magic crystal cannon had just been launched, it was definitely unusable. It was just the right opportunity to send a stronger army. Magician Legion, buff with speed magic. The Third Army Formation and the Demon-equipped Legion, launch! The combat power of this wave was stronger than the first wave. Especially the demon-equipped legion was equipped with siege ladders and large shields which could effectively resist the enemy's arrows. Coupled with the speed magic to make up for the weakness of poor mobility, it would be a powerful weapon in close combat and siege warfare. Just as the Third Army formation and the demon-equipped legion advanced quickly, several white lights were ejected from the parapet wall of the Moonlight Fortress. If the previous red flame magic crystal cannon was a parabolic shot, then the white light beam in front of them was a straight line. It was like a destructive giant sword that cut straight into the enemy's formation. It was actually moving slowly. The enemy along the way had no time to resist or evade, so they were disintegrated into particles and dissipated. The second round of army formation cleared out a few fan-shaped lines. Damn it! Geraint didn't expect the Dark Moon to have another kind of magic crystal cannon, and it was also very terrifying. He originally thought that the Dark Moon would definitely resist stubbornly in this battle, but he didn't expect this bone to be harder to gnaw than he imagined. Before touching the Moonlight Fortress, his side had already suffered a lot. In any case, it was already a situation where there was no retreat. There could not be any hesitation. Although the magic crystal cannon eliminated a lot of soldiers, as Geraint expected, once they crossed the firing range, they could not play a role. The coalition army that had rushed past the death line rushed toward the fortress aggressively. Although the magic traps and magic circles along the way played a role, they were instantly filled by the human wave tactic. Loki calmly watched the enemy that was gradually approaching, and he secretly calculated the distance. He pointed the long sword in his hand, and the messenger immediately sent a signal. Behind the city wall in a row, several rows of archers drew their bows and began to shoot arrows into the air in turn. Throw shot. These archers were equipped with a thumb ring, invented by Chunrei. The shooting speed was very fast. The sky full of arrows splashed down from above the fortress. Under this indiscriminate attack, the capital coalition army at the forefront fell to the ground one after another. On the parapet of the fortress, graceful female figures holding bows and carrying huge quivers appeared one after another. The graceful here referred to their upper bodies, and their lower bodies could only be described as wriggling Medusa warriors. This group of 1,000 Medusas were originally members of the Moon Shadow Legion, but they were transferred over this time. Loki shouted, and the Medusas in light armor pulled their bows in unison, aimed at the target, and fired. Medusa's archery was one of the best in the entire demon realm. Especially after being strengthened by the devil fruit, each arrow could almost take a life. However, the number of coalition army was extremely large. Many people had approached the city wall under the rain of arrows, especially the demon-equipped legion. With the cover of big shields and heavy armor, they blocked a lot of arrows. Siege ladders were set up, and they were about to reach the city wall. Suddenly, countless giant green vines with thorns emerged from the ground. The terrifying plants intertwined, grew and spread rapidly like giant snakes, entangling the approaching siege ladders and enemies. The vines were powerful and seemed to have some kind of special attribute. Even if the enemies entangled didn't shatter like the siege ladders, they would soon lose resistance and be strangled. What made the coalition army even more shocked was that the cut-off parts of this terrifying plant could actually regenerate as if it was endless. Guardian Vine, large protective plant. Attribute, regeneration, stun, bind. Germination begins 10 seconds after sowing. Maturity period, 24 hours. It can grow in soil of any quality. Automatically attacks hostile creatures. The degree of hostile attack can be adjusted. Chapter 508. Before Chunrei left the Dark Moon, he had placed a large number of guardian vine seeds on the wall of the Moonlight Fortress. Now that they appeared as a surprise attack, they really received an unexpected effect. With the assistance of the guardian vine and the powerful shooting of the Medusa and other archers, all the nearby enemies were cleared. Several army formations and the demon-equipped legions suffered heavy losses, and the pace of advancement could not help but slow down. The Capital Coalition Army's front army commander, Geraint's face looked a little ugly. He could feel the angry gaze coming from the main tent in the distance almost without looking back. Before this battle was over, the losses were already far beyond expectations. The enemy only suffered a few casualties because of the approaching arrows, but the number of casualties on his side alone was estimated to be tens of thousands. Geraint sighed secretly. In fact, his command did not make a mistake this time, but the dark moon brought too many surprises to the coalition army. Behind this surprise was not accidental, but inevitable. Not to mention the dark moon, just the fortress in front of us was not a bone that could be easily taken down. Although they encountered the obstacles in front of them, it was not a problem for the army to take down the Moonlight Fortress. It was just that Royal Highness Obsidian once said that either we don't move, or we sweep the enemy with thunderous momentum. Now the losses and battle situation were beyond expectations. It was related to the face of the Royal Highness Regent. Even if the fortress was taken down by then, it would be difficult to keep his position as the front army commander and the deputy commander of the coalition army. However, Geraint quickly dispelled these distracting thoughts and focused on the battlefield. He was a soldier. No matter what happened after the war, he must do his best to defeat the enemy on the battlefield. The 4th Army formation is ready to dispatch. Blood Flag Legion and Evil Spirit Legion are on standby. Messenger, immediately go to the main tent to report to the Royal Highness Regent and request to dispatch the Flying Cloud Legion to resolve the battle quickly. The main force of the front army was dispatched, and he even requested air support. Geraint was going all out this time. He wanted to defeat the defense of the Moonlight Fortress as soon as possible. The messenger's request soon reached the command tent of the coalition army's middle army. Obsidian sneered. Flying Cloud Legion? I'm afraid it's not enough. I'll even dispatch the Dragon Rider Legion. I want to see how long it will take Sir Deputy Commander to take down this small fortress with the support of these strongest air legions. Obsidian knew in his heart that there was not much problem with Geraint's command, but Obsidian himself had vowed in public before the expedition that this time the troops could sweep the Dark Moon. Now, it was only the first checkpoint of the Moonlight Fortress. They had lost so many people without even going up the wall. Most of them were the army of the lords. Whether it was the face of the regent or the explanation to the lords, it was not justifiable, so someone must bear this responsibility. If it was Jia, she would take the initiative to take the responsibility, but Obsidian was not Jia. What he needed was the prestige that he believed in, so this scapegoat could only be Geraint. After several failed attempts to ascend the city, the rhythm of the attack suddenly slowed down a lot. At this time, the defenders of the Moonlight Fortress saw countless dense black spots in the distant sky. The enemy's aerial army! Athena's expression became serious. There are so many of them. This is the Flying Cloud Legion. Nesta was most familiar with the Legion of the capital. He looked at it attentively and exclaimed, Not good! Behind that is, even the Dragon Rider Legion is mobilized. The Flying Cloud Legion was an aerial force composed of mutated griffin, mainly demonic beasts. There were many of them. There were more than 5,000 of them. They had superb combat skills and were good at sieges. The Dragon Rider Legion was the dragon riders riding wyverns. There were 1,500 of them. Their combat power was very powerful. Athena frowned and said, The Flying Dragon Legion has been on standby on the mountain behind. Our wyverns are similar to the enemy, but there are only 1,000 griffin riders. We are at an absolute disadvantage in terms of numbers. Nesta nodded. The Dragon Rider Legion's commander is called Salgar. He has both magic and martial arts. He is at the early stage of the Demon Overlord. He has a violent personality and strong combat power. The Flying Cloud Legion's commander is called Rometti. She is comparable to me in strength, and she is quite scheming. She is very difficult to deal with. There is also a Manticore team under her command. They are very powerful. Why are you saying so much? A firm voice said. Leave these guys to me. As soon as Athena and others turned their heads, they saw the beautiful girl's firm eyes, firm expression, and the most firm was her tone. Athena, remember to calculate the money for me." This sentence made a drop of sweat fall from Athena's forehead, but she still knew that there must be a brave dragon with a high reward. She nodded. "Then you go and take the lead. The Flying Dragon Legion will arrive soon. The aerial force is very difficult to deal with. I will double the amount." The girl's cool expression suddenly turned into a smile. She held her hand. "Athena, I know you are the best. Be careful." Athena knew that Oliphius was very powerful, but there were too many enemies, and there were even demon overlord powerhouses. Miss Long Black could not fight against them alone. "Don't be too greedy. Remember that the cavalry in black armor is on our side. Don't fight the wrong person. Paglio, please go to the back mountain immediately. If you fight the wrong person, the money will be deducted. If you really can hold on, I will go to the back mountain first. At that time, I might save your life for little Betty's sake." Paglio, who had not spoken, said while holding the wine bottle. His lazy expression did not seem to pay attention to the black spots that were gradually enlarging in the distant sky. A while ago, Oliphius was simply Master Poison Dragon's nightmare. Her stalking technique made Paglio's scalp numb. It was rare for little Betty's closed-door cultivation to have a happy life, but it was ruined in the claws of this miser. He didn't get the lamb, but he got himself into trouble instead. However, the relationship between little Betty and Oliphius was getting better and better. They looked like good sisters and partners. There was also a terrifying madwoman behind them to support them. Master Poison Dragon's life was as bitter as it could be. Now that I have seized the opportunity, I naturally have to avenge my personal grievances, lest this chick thinks that I am easy to bully. Miss Black Long snorted at Master Poison Dragon and ignored him. Instead, Lomont, who was whispering to Nesta, said, "I'll deal with Rometty later." Oliphius glanced at Lomont with professional suspicion. "You seem to be asking Nesta just now if Rometty is a beauty? This chick is too terrifying. No wonder Paglio is like facing a formidable enemy." Lomont broke out in a cold sweat. He quickly changed the topic and pointed to the demonic beasts in the air that were getting closer and closer and said, "They are coming." The demonic beasts flying all over the sky were like a fast-moving black cloud, almost covering the light of the two moons. The air was full of noisy chirping. Before they flew over, they had brought heavy psychological pressure to the Dark Moon's defenders. The appearance of the Air Force skyrocketed the morale of the Capital Coalition Army. Gerrand immediately ordered the Fourth Army and the Blood Flag Legion to attack. The original attack in front of the city wall also began to become unprecedentedly fierce. The Guardian Vines began to be unable to suppress them. The regeneration speed could not keep up with the speed of destruction, and their vitality was gradually exhausted. Obsidian looked at this scene from a distance, and his eyes narrowed slightly. From the intelligence, the Dark Moon's air force is at most 2,000 people. How can it compete with the 7,000 Capital Army? There are still 5 army formations on the ground, plus 2 legions. With a two-pronged attack, it is only a matter of time before the Moonlight Fortress collapses. Suddenly, there was a figure above the Moonlight Fortress. He instantly appeared in front of the large black, dark cloud, and he rushed up without fear. Compared with the dark cloud, this figure seemed insignificant. However, after this figure rushed close, the dark cloud was actually torn open like waves. Wyverns and griffin beasts were constantly falling along the way. Most of them were deterred by a certain breath exuded by this figure, and dared not approach. Standing on a mutated wyvern king without any armor was the Dragon Rider Legion commander, Salgar. Seeing that the other party was a young girl, he flew over with his mount, channeled his magic power, and shouted, "Leave this woman to me, you guys attack the fortress directly!" The surrounding dragon riders accepted the order, divided into several teams, and accelerated toward the Moonlight Fortress. Oliphius's first priority was to make money, so she didn't bother with Salgar at all. She flew straight after the dragon riders. Her flying speed was much faster than the wyverns. Wherever she went, wyverns fell like rain. These dragon riders and wyverns were trained by Salgar. Seeing that the girl killed all the way and caused heavy casualties, he couldn't help but be furious. A red light appeared in his hand, and several fireballs seemed to have eyes. They followed Oliphius and whizzed away. Oliphius just grabbed the wing of a wyvern, and she seemed to have no time to defend. Her back was continuously hit by the fireball. After the shock and sparks dissipated, the wyvern whose wings were torn off was burning all over. In a wail, she fell straight down with the dragon riders on her back. As if she didn't see Salgar, Oliphius flew to another wyvern. Salgar's speed was always a little slower. He watched a dozen riders being slashed down by the girl, and she simply ignored him, a demon overlord powerhouse. He became more and more annoyed, and the magic in his hand was launched one after another. Unfortunately, it didn't work. In a hurry, Salgar released a series of lightning. As a result, Oliphius was fine, but the two wyverns next to her were killed by the aftermath of the lightning instead. Oliphius bluntly counted these two wyverns on her account. Salgar almost lost his head in anger. Fortunately, the team of dragon riders chased by Oliphius was very astute. They took the risk of being killed on the way and turned around with the black mist long to the front of Salgar. When Salgar saw Oliphius finally approaching, he roared, rose from the Wyvern King, and waved his hands continuously. The cavalry in the distance only saw a strange change in the space near Salgar and Oliphius. It was as if pieces of glass were cut open, forming a strange three-dimensional cube that wrapped the two of them. The situation inside could not be seen from the outside, and even the sound was isolated. It was as if a translucent cube appeared out of thin air. The territory of space power? Oliphius was slightly surprised as she looked at this strange space that was completely isolated from the outside. There were countless translucent mirrors floating in the air inside. This is the realm of space that I created with my talent and territory. In this territory, you will see the powerful compound magic and even the lost space magic. Salgar sneered. I have used it to kill an intermediate stage demon overlord opponent. Even if your strength is slightly stronger than me, you are not my opponent. It's just magic. Why are you talking so much nonsense? Don't hinder me from making money. Oliphius's dismissive and contemptuous attitude made Salgar furious. Countless flames burst out from his body. His hands were continuously moving. For a time, lightning, hurricane, flame, and ice filled the entire territory. When these magic touched the mirror, various refractions and reflections occurred. The speed and power suddenly increased, and they blasted toward Oliphius simultaneously. Boom, boom, boom. In the light, there was a violent impact and a burst sound. A shadow blasted out and punched toward Salgar. This punch hit Salgar right in the middle, and it suddenly shattered, but it was just the mirror that shattered. You can actually take my magic head on. You are indeed a powerhouse of the intermediate stage demon overlord. You should have a special defensive talent ability, right? Unfortunately, you can't touch me in this territory. Salgar's figure appeared on the other side again. Oliphius's reaction was extremely fast. She appeared in front of Salgar like lightning, and with another blow, the mirror shattered again. It's useless! Salgar's laughter echoed in the territory. For a time, countless figures appeared around Oliphius. As they waved, the originally broken mirror was restored to its original state, and various powerful attack magic appeared again. These magic are getting stronger and stronger in this space. When your talent power is exhausted, it will be the time for you to shatter into pieces. Just when Oliphius was trapped in Salgar's territory, the Flying Cloud Legion and the Dragon Rider Legion had arrived at the city wall. Arrows were pouring into the air like rain from below, but the flying speed of the demonic beasts in the air was very fast. Even Medusa, who was equipped with armor-piercing arrows, wanted to shoot down a griffin with a few arrows. The soldiers on the griffin began to shoot arrows downward, while the wyverns directly attacked the defenders with their claws and teeth. The Capital Coalition army under the city wall launched a fierce attack at the same time. A siege ladder successfully appeared on the city wall. The soldiers below braved the vines and arrow rain to climb the ladder desperately. When the leading great demon was halfway up the ladder, he activated his teleportation talent and instantly moved to the city wall. As soon as he stood firm, he met a pair of snake-like vertical pupils on the opposite side. He felt his body numb and began to stiffen quickly. Before he could be completely petrified, he was already cut in half by the centaur next to Medusa with an axe. The number of siege ladders gradually increased, and more enemies climbed the city wall. The archers were forced to retreat and mainly used projectile shots. The melee soldiers bravely went forward and launched hand-to-hand combat. The most troublesome thing was the attack from the air, which was almost difficult to defend. "Hold on!" The judgment great sword in Athena's hand left her hand and drew an arc in the air. She cut off the left wing of a wyvern that was about to attack the soldiers. When she flew back, she grabbed it and cut a griffin that swept over into half like lightning. "Our wyvern legion is about to arrive!" As soon as she finished speaking, the hissing of wyverns faintly sounded behind. "The reinforcements are finally here." Faster than these wyverns was a huge figure that suddenly appeared in the sky. This figure suddenly let out a roar that resounded throughout the battlefield. Above the moonlight fortress, the wyverns and griffin beasts that were baring their fangs and claws trembled at the same time. They were shocked and scattered. The weaker griffin beasts that were closer were even scared by this roar. Their wings softened, and they fell to the ground from midair. In the distance, Obsidian's complexion changed slightly. "Dragons? And they are quite strong." The peak stage of the demon overlord. Chapter 509. What appeared in front of everyone was a huge dragon with yellowish-brown scales, fin-like things on both of its cheeks, and a row of short horns on its head. Its whole body was wrapped in a layer of black armor, and its dark golden snake eyes glowed with a cold light. The dragon roar just now contained a powerful dragon's demeanor. Its lethality was indiscriminate. Whether it was the demonic beasts in the air or the attackers and defenders on the ground, they were all scared out of their wits, and their limbs were weak. Many enemies on the siege ladders were even shaken to the ground. The only thing that was not affected was the guardian vine. It took this opportunity to regenerate quickly and mince the siege ladders one by one. The griffin that was scared out of its wits retreated in fear. They didn't dare to go forward. The wyverns were strictly trained subdragons after all. Although they were afraid of the dragon's demeanor, under the command of the dragon cavalry's beast-taming skill, many of them circled back and rushed toward the giant dragon in fear. The giant dragon flapped its wings, and screams could be heard everywhere it passed. It didn't even need the giant dragon's claws or teeth to attack. The wyverns that were touched would fall to the ground. Many of the wyverns emitted sizzling green smoke as they were corroded by some kind of terrible poison. Soon, their bones were exposed. The wyvern's attack couldn't penetrate the black armor on the giant dragon at all. It didn't even leave a mark. As for the wyvern's toxin, it was simply a joke in front of the poison ancestor, the poison dragon. At this time, the black-armored wyverns and griffin rushed to the battlefield from the rear of the dark moon. These demonic beasts of the Wyvern Legion had faced Paglio many times in the training base in the Black Rainforest. Although they were afraid, their performance was much better than the capital's Air Legion. They avoided the poison dragon and rushed toward the capital's terrified Air Legion. A thrilling aerial battle began. The air was full of the roars and tearing sounds of demonic beasts. Countless flying and circling shadows dimmed the light of the two moons. The Dark Moon's air force was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of number, but their strength was far beyond the opponent's imagination. The first was the equipment. In addition to the necessary long spears in the hands of the Dark Moon's air cavalries, there were also throwable short spears and armor-piercing crossbows that shot explosive arrows. They could launch powerful attacks from a distance. The difference in equipment was also reflected on the demonic beasts. Even the worst griffin in the Dark Moon was covered with armor. This kind of armor was made of some special materials and craftsmanship. It was light and tough, and it had little impact on the speed of flight. On the other hand, except for some elite wyverns and manticores with armor, the rest of the capital's legion only had flying hornbills that assisted the cavalry to drive. It was almost equivalent to being naked. These equipment were actually a competition of money. If one didn't look at the quantity and just looked at the equipment, one would feel that the Dark Moon's Air Force was the strongest regular army of an empire's capital. This undoubtedly hurt one's self-esteem. In this kind of real battlefield of life and death, it was not only self-esteem but also life that was hurt. The Dark Moon was not only strong in equipment, but also in the individual strength of the wyvern. The strength of these wyverns was obviously stronger than that of the capital's wyverns. Many of them also had special abilities such as spitting flames, freezing poisonous breath, doubling the toughness of their body, doubling the flying speed, etc. In a one-on-one battle, they could be said to completely crush the opponent. Rometty, the legion commander of the capital's Flying Cloud Legion, who was riding on the back of a mutated double-headed manticore, was a little stunned. She thought her eyes were blurred. Are these still wyverns? It's fine if it's one or two, but why are they so fierce collectively? If Rometty knew what the Dark Moon's wyverns ate, she wouldn't be so surprised. No, this answer should shock her even more. Someone will feed that thing to demonic beasts. And it's hundreds and thousands of them? However, Rometty didn't have much time to think about it. She currently needed to focus on dealing with the terrifying dragon. Although the breath she felt from the dragon was far better than her demon emperor level, under her command, dozens of Manticore squad members led the Flying Cloud Legion's most elite 1,000 griffin formed an encirclement to surround the dragon. These griffin all activated some kind of magic tattoo. The mysterious power produced by the crisscrossing flight and displacement coordination was enough to barely offset the terrifying attack made by the dragon, but it could only barely restrain it because the dragon's power and dragon's demeanor were too terrifying. Even this kind of battle formation couldn't be maintained for long. Each blow would seriously injure or kill the griffin. What they had to do was to try their best to trap the opponent, buy time for the siege troops on the ground, and wait for reinforcements from their own powerhouses. From time to time, Rometty would harass the giant dragon at critical moments, trying her best to reduce the casualties of the elites. However, the giant dragon's defense was too astonishing. Not to mention the armor on its body, even its wings could not be penetrated by her magic arrows. "Beauty, are you free? Why don't we find a quiet place to talk about ideals in life?" A clear voice that contained power drilled into Rometty's ears. Rometty turned her head and saw a wyvern rushing toward her with a man on its back. Rometty could see that this wyvern was definitely a mutated king. Its strength had reached the demon emperor level, which was comparable to her double-headed manticore. So, the enemy behind the wyvern should be the commander of the enemy's aerial legion. If I can kill the opponent, it should be able to severely damage the morale of the Dark Moon army. Thinking of this, Rometty urged the double-headed manticore to face the opponent without hesitation. The moment the two sides passed each other, the two demon emperor-level demonic beasts had already attacked each other several times. As soon as they pulled apart, Rometty, who was on the back of the manticore, suddenly turned around. 7 powerful magic arrows were shot out almost instantly, and the target was the knight behind the wyvern king. The knight also turned around. The moment the 7 magic arrows approached him, they stopped abruptly. They were broken in half almost at the same time and fell to the ground powerlessly. Rometty's pupils contracted slightly. Her archery was the best in the capital. The 7 luminaries flash just now contained 4 changes. 3 of the arrows would suddenly speed up, and one would even draw an arc to attack the opponent's side. However, they were all broken in the blink of an eye by the opponent without exception. It was not dodging, but cutting. The passing, shooting, and breaking of the arrows just happened in a few blinks of an eye. The wyvern king and the double-headed manticore circled around and came back again. "Beauty, I have received your love. I think there is hope for us to further deepen our relationship." This frivolous voice did not particularly anger Rometty. Instead, her lavender sexy lips curled slightly, and a strong fighting spirit burned. The quasi-legendary grade purple electric bow in her hand began to sizzle. The addition of the aerial legion greatly boosted the morale of the Dark Moon's defenders. They could finally free up their hands to focus on dealing with the enemy attacking the city. However, the pressure was still very high. After the enemy's military formation and the capital's regular legion joined in, the ground attack became more aggressive. Battles of life and death could be seen everywhere on the city wall. The original enemies had not been completely eliminated yet, and new siege ladders had been set up. In front of the huge iron gate of the fortress, several giant beasts lined up side by side were already approaching step by step under the drive of the magic-equipped legion. These giant beasts had tough skin and 3 hard blunt horns on their foreheads. They were extremely strong, and their charging ability was especially shocking. They were the nightmare of all defense facilities. The fortress's defenders desperately shot arrows at the giant beasts, but the magic-equipped legion was already prepared. Not only did they cover the giant beasts with armor, but there were also soldiers on both sides and the back holding giant shields to protect them. Even the armor-piercing arrows could not penetrate them. On the other side, the Blood Flag Legion's goblin warriors who passed the blockade of the Dark Moon magic crystal cannons began to quickly set up siege equipment. Now that they were going all out to attack the city, it was easy to accidentally injure their own people. The magic crystal cannons were definitely not suitable, so the goblins set up catapults. It was a fierce battle at the top of the Dark Moon's city wall. It was very difficult to even launch the magic crystal cannons, let alone spend a lot of time to adjust the angle to attack these catapults. The crisis was getting more and more intense. The battle in the air was also extremely fierce. The Dark Moon had an advantage in individual strength, but the number was much smaller than the opponent. Furthermore, the experience of the knights was inferior to the opponent. They were often besieged by enemies that were 2 or 3 times their size, and they could only barely maintain a stalemate with the opponent. The giant beasts of Mengchong were getting closer and closer. Their bodies were full of arrows. Many soldiers holding giant shields were also shot and killed by the Medusas, but they still couldn't stop the giant beasts. Under the efforts of the goblin warriors, the catapults in the distance were quickly set up. Boulders poured with magic oil were placed on them. The centaurs struggled to push the capstan and pressed the spring of the catapult to the lowest point. After the goblin warriors saw the boulders ignited, they pulled the trigger abruptly. Tung! Tung! Tang! Several meteors, with flames, flew high, leaving trails of thick smoke in the air. They flew toward the Moonlight Fortress and smashed into the fortifications behind the city wall or the ground with terrifying power. The rubble was spark-splashed, and an exaggerated scorched fire pit appeared. An arrow tower was hit, and half of it suddenly collapsed. The archers inside screamed and fell down. The lethality of these flaming stones was indeed very strong. Thick smoke began to billow in the Moonlight Fortress. At the critical moment, another dragon roar sounded. The elite griffin that surrounded the dragon fell like hail. Many of them turned into skeletons under the influence of some terrifying power before they fell to the ground. Rometti's 2-headed manticore was fighting fiercely with the Wyvern King. It was shocked by this dragon roar. Although the Wyvern King was also shocked, its reaction and recovery were much faster. It bit the manticore's head. The manticore was in pain and struggled to break free. It flapped its wings and flew away. The armor on its body was cracked, and the claws of the Wyvern King left 4 shocking bloody marks. Rometti was about to draw her bow and shoot the pursuing Wyvern King when she suddenly felt a chill on her shoulder. The armor on her shoulder had been split into 2 and fell down. A knife mark appeared on her shoulder, and blood flowed out. She was secretly shocked. It was just a moment of crossing paths, but that guy attacked so quickly. What surprised her even more was that the giant dragon broke through the encirclement of the Legion elites faster than she imagined. Now she had to quickly get rid of the enemy behind her and command the army to restrain the giant dragon again. Lomont was the one driving the Wyvern King. In reality, the commander of the Wyvern army was someone else. Lomont only wanted to restrain Rometti. After seeing through Rometti's intentions, he pursued her relentlessly, not giving her a chance to catch her breath. Paglio, who had broken free from the encirclement, spread his wings and dove downwards. His target was the Imperial Coalition army that was swarming towards the stronghold. The poisonous dragon opened its huge mouth and spat out balls of dragon breath. The speed of these dragon breath was not very fast, and it brought with it a green fog. However, a terrifying thing happened. Wherever the fog went, whether it was soldiers or warhorses, they all turned into green smoke and dissipated. It created crisscrossing lines of death in the sea of people. Smoke rose up everywhere on the battlefield. The soldiers at the back could not see what was happening in front of them. They only knew that they were charging forward. Many of the soldiers at the front were pushed into the fog, and they did not even have the time to scream before they were turned into ashes. By the time they reacted, countless lives had already been taken by the fog. Many of the soldiers fell into a huge panic. Poison dragons were a rare type of dragons. Their strength and talent were not the strongest among them, but from the perspective of war or mass killing, they were definitely the most terrifying giant dragons. Piglio saw the danger at the city gate, and was about to fly over when he suddenly felt a warning. His huge body twisted, and his long tail lashed out behind him like a whip. A figure behind him flashed in an instant and dodged. Powerful dragons! The figure appeared in front of Piglio. It was a middle-aged man with 3 pairs of light wings on his back. He also exuded the breath of the peak stage of the demon overlord. I'm Disjaro, Lucifer of the fallen angel royal family. This should not be the battlefield of the giant dragons. If Sir leaves now, our Royal Highness is willing to pay a large sum of wealth as compensation. The answer to Disjaro was a cluster of highly poisonous dragon breath. Disjaro frowned and dodged with the holy light wings. He bowed slightly. Sir, please don't do it first. I'm a friend of Elder Southgale of the Dragon Island. Please look at. Before he finished speaking, there was another clear dragon roar behind him. It actually came from the cube space created by Salgar's territory. It was originally impossible to emit sound in this territory space, but the dragon roar just came out. Immediately afterward, in the next blink of an eye, the translucent cube space suddenly shattered like glass, and a huge figure appeared in it. Disjaro's complexion changed drastically. It's another giant dragon! This giant dragon was much smaller than the poison dragon. It was about 7 or 8 meters long. Its whole body was covered with black scales. Only its abdomen was slightly dark red. The ends of its claws and horns glowed with a pale silver light. It flapped its wings and roared angrily. In the shattered space, a figure flew out crookedly. It was the Dragon Rider Legion commander, Salgar. Judging from his appearance, he was obviously seriously injured. The Wyvern King under Salgar was extremely intelligent. It immediately caught its master and fled desperately toward its own camp. Salgar regretted it in his heart. That girl is actually a dragon's. Moreover, she's the nemesis of magic, a black dragon. The strongest thing about his space realm was unlimited magic and magic enhancement. However, after reflecting and refracting for a long time, his attacks were just tickles on her body. In the end, this chick was annoyed. She revealed her true form and destroyed the entire space with a black dragon cannon. She was also seriously injured. Disjaro felt the breath of the black dragon, and he was even more shocked. A black dragon of the intermediate stage of the demon overlord. A poison dragon of the peak stage of the demon overlord. Crobolus, who originally betrayed the Dark Moon, seems to also be a dragon. An estate actually has 3 demon overlord dragons. Could it be that the supporter behind the Dark Moon estate is the Dragon Island? How is this possible? Just as Disjaro was distracted, a terrifying force had already attacked from the side. It turned out that the giant dragon had transformed into a man and launched a sneak attack while he was not paying attention. Disjaro hastily tried to block, but he missed. The fist made a strange turn and hit him in the ribs. Disjaro only felt a sharp pain and heard the sound of his bones breaking. He endured the pain and shouted, "Wait a minute! I won't attack just because you said wait?" Bah! Piglio was never a guy who cared about manners. Besides, he was on the battlefield, so he turned a deaf ear to Disjaro's words. After the successful blow, he immediately launched a fierce attack. Disjaro suddenly fell into a passive position. He had always cherished his reputation. The opponent's strength was stronger than he imagined. Even under normal circumstances, he was not his opponent. Moreover, another black dragon was nearby. If he continued to fight, his life might be in danger. Thinking of this, Disjaro took 2 punches and leaped with the momentum. He finally escaped the storm-like attack. Piglio's disdainful voice came from behind. "I'm just a wandering ghost. What does it have to do with the Dragon Island? It's useless even if you sell your ass to that South Gale. I have never seen such a despicable, shameless, rude, and obscene dragons." The last sentence of the poisoned dragon almost made Disjaro spit out blood again. He didn't dare to stay. He activated the holy wings and hurriedly retreated toward the coalition army camp. "Hey, chick! Don't overdo it! Get rid of the catapult below first. That's valuable!" Oliphius had just broken free from the remaining power of Space Realm, and she was chasing Salgar. When she heard the poison dragon's last 2 words, she immediately flew toward the flame catapults below. In front of Ms. Black Dragon's power, those catapults were simply vulnerable. They were all destroyed like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Oliphius was very smart. She didn't dare to attack the Capital Coalition Army's base camp. She just followed Piglio to bully the enemies who attacked on the front line. In the fortress area, due to the deterrence of the poisonous mist, the Capital Coalition Army's offensive was significantly slower. Athena's figure appeared above the city gate. She shouted, jumped high, and slashed the Judgment great sword in her hand at the few huge Mengchong beasts. The great sword emitted a fiery red brilliance. With Athena as the center, a fan-shaped area of about 60 to 70 meters was formed. Flesh and blood flew everywhere. The enemies seemed to be crushed by some terrifying force. Their bodies were shattered. Even the huge Mengchong beasts were no exception. Even the huge Mengchong beasts were torn apart along with the armor on their bodies. The artifact greatsword's inherent skill, judgment. Athena succeeded in one move and cleared the biggest threat in the city gate area. She took the rope thrown down by Nesta, and her figure rose quickly. In a flash on the way, she had teleported to the top of the city wall, making the arrows flying toward her miss. Due to the rampage of the 2 giant dragons, the capital's air legion had gradually begun to be overwhelmed. The destruction of the catapult and the Mengchong beasts made the morale of the defenders even higher. The situation was suddenly reversed. The commander of the front army, Geraint, saw clearly that Rometty was entangled, Salgar was seriously injured, and Disjaro, who was not in the mood to fight, was defeated. At this time, the sky was getting dark. Fighting at night was even more disadvantageous for the coalition army. If this continued, the losses would be greater and greater. He immediately sighed and ordered the horn of retreat to be blown. In the coalition army camp, the soldiers all looked at each other. No one expected that the first battle against the Dark Moon would end in failure. Seeing the demonic beasts in the air that turned around and flew away and the enemy on the ground that retreated like a tide, the Dark Moon's defenders all let out deafening cheers. Hearing the distant cheers, the regent and the coalition army commander, Obsidian's purple pupils that were full of haze in the capital's main army tent looked even gloomier. Chapter 510. White Feather City, City Lord's Mansion. Lord Sikali was about to entertain a distinguished guest whose name was Fako. "Sir Lord, please forgive me for taking the liberty to visit." Chenrei smiled humbly and bowed. Sikali also smiled. "If every visiting guest is as presumptuous as Sir Fako, I can't wait to welcome them. However, Sir's repeated spending makes me feel uneasy." Chenrei activated the Stargate to return to the White Feather Estate from the Warlock Fortress in an instant. The star point of the Stargate could be set up. One was set up after he came to the White Feather Estate, and the other was in the Dark Moon City. If he wanted to return to the Dark Moon City now, it would only take a blink of an eye, but he still had a lot of things to do, so he couldn't go back. Chenrui was very clear about his abilities. His brain was quite flexible, and he had the ability to plan and adapt to the situation. As for creativity, it was basically the plagiarized benefit of a transmigrator, but it was definitely a shortcoming in large-scale military operations and on-the-spot command. In this regard, Athena and Xiao were far better than him. If he rushed back now, he was just a strong individual combat power in the war. There were several demon overlord combat powers, so he couldn't play a key role. The Dark Moon was likely to be in a tough battle now. There were lovers, partners, and friends there, so there were definitely concerns, but he also had to trust their power. Once he could complete the planned mission outside, then his role would definitely be stronger than going back. When Chenrui left the White Feather City for the Warlock Fortress, he instructed the Dark Demon to send a generous gift to the City Lord's mansion in the name of Faco every day. In these 3 days he sent 3 gifts. Now that Chenrui visited in person, Sikali, who was deeply impressed, naturally showed considerable enthusiasm. In Chenrui's analytical eyes, Sikali's true strength was a intermediate stage of the Demon Emperor, so the Sikali in front of him was still the person who played football in the arena, not the Sikali who had visited the Dark Moon. Chenrui suddenly had another bold assumption in his mind: even if it is the Sikali who visited the Dark Moon, must it be the real Sikali? These psychological changes were only fleeting. Chenrui maintained a smile on his face and said, "Sir Lord is too polite. It's just a small token of my appreciation. It's a little compensation for my presumptuous behavior in the arena lounge. I have said that I will choose a time that is not presumptuous to pay a formal visit as the beginning of our friendship. Then, as a testament to our friendship, please accept this present." Chenrui took out a small box and opened it. There was a golden ring in the shape of a dragon's entrenched on the ring. It was exquisite and grand. This is a legendary magic ring called the Magic Track Ring. It can increase magic power and mental strength by 35% and increase movement speed by 30%. It also comes with a protective spell called Magic Shield. It can be used twice a day. Sikali's eyes flashed, and he couldn't move his eyes away from the Magic Trace Ring. Increase magic power and spirit power. Increase speed. This is simply a tailor-made equipment for him, and it also comes with a life-saving protective magic. For him, the value of this ring is far above the general legendary grade equipment. Sir might as well try it on. Chenrui handed the box to the maid on the side and presented it to Sikali. Sikali took out the ring and put it on his index finger. He felt that his spirit power and magic power had indeed become more surging. According to Chenrui's instructions, after activating a certain pivot point of the ring with spirit power, a transparent magic shield appeared around him. This shield was the magic that came with the ring itself. It did not consume the owner's magic power. It was definitely a good thing to save lives at critical moments. This gift is too expensive. I don't deserve it. Sikali was amazed, but he did not intend to take off the ring at all. The more expensive it is, the more sincere our friendship is. As Chenrui said, he looked at the maids around him. Sikali understood and ordered them to retreat. Sir Faco, I have already felt your sincerity and patience. Sikali regained his calmness. It's just that something has happened in the north of the estate recently. You should also know, so my mood has been unstable and my patience is not very good. My friend, what is your intention? Just tell me. As long as the situation permits, I will try my best to help. Sikali's meaning was very simple. I accept the gift. If you have something to say, I don't have the time to waste with you now. Is there any help? Chenrui asked rhetorically. The gain is often equal to the effort. Sikali pondered for a moment and said cautiously, It's just that my ability as a lord is limited. If it is some special requirements beyond my ability, I'm afraid it will be difficult to do. Chenrui had the intention to test, so he deliberately followed the tone and asked, For example? Let's be clear. Although I'm a royal family, I'm just a hereditary lord. I just want to keep this hard-won estate. Sikali spread his hands. I'm a person who abides by my duty. I don't dare to have more excessive thoughts. Why does Sir think I will make such a request? Sekali frowned. Sir Faco, since we are friends, let's not beat around the bush. Even if your request is too excessive, I won't pursue it for the sake of our friendship. Even if you are a member of a force wanted by the capital now. I have already said it to this extent. If you still beat around the bush, then I can only question your sincerity. This Sekali's patience seems to be a little worse than the one who visited the dark moon. He seems to be a little impetuous. I don't know if he is really upset about the Warlock fortress in the north of the White Feather Estate, or perhaps it is something else. However, his words made Shinrui's heart move, and his mind turned quickly. A force wanted by the fallen angel capital. Could it be Bloodfall? In this way, Sekali misunderstood me as a member of the Bloodfall. Indeed, Shinrui's generosity is somewhat similar to the last time when Brock tried to win me over. Judging from Sekali's tone, he has been in contact with the people of the Bloodfall organization before, or he has been encouraged by some improper thoughts. The Bloodfall's ambition is very big. The so-called improper thoughts must be related to the subversion of the three empires. I don't understand what Sir is talking about. Shinrui decided to beat him at his own game. What I can tell Sir is that my force is very large and the members are complicated. There are royal family nobles, giant dragons, and descendants of the fallen royal family. So it is inevitable that there will be many factions. I can't tell Sir more things, and I don't know if Sir has been in contact with other factions or even joined a faction. However, what I can tell Sir Lord is that my faction is the most powerful. As long as Sir is willing, we can satisfy any of Sir's wishes. Any wish? Sekali's eyes flashed, just like Shinrui's previous rhetorical question. Of course, for example, Sir's restless mood. Shinrui nodded very firmly. However, friendship is mutual, just like giving and returning in a proportional relationship. Sekali nodded slightly as if he was thinking about something. Shinrui keenly captured the fleeting strange light in Sekali's eyes, and he stood up. I will be living in the White Armor Hotel in the west of the city during this time. If Sir needs me, you can summon me at any time. Then, I won't disturb Sir's rest anymore. I'll leave now. Sekali nodded and looked at Shinrui's back with a thoughtful expression. Late at night, in a secret room of the city lord's mansion, there was a faint scream of a woman. Under the bright magic light, one could see the torture instruments hanging on the wall. A fair-skinned naked woman was imprisoned in the center of the room by a strange torture instrument. She leaned down, her head and hands were fixed to the shackles, and her buttocks were raised. The beauty of the woman between the buttocks was clearly visible. This posture could undoubtedly accelerate the secretion of many male hormones. A man stood behind the woman, waving a strange whip in his hand. In the woman's scream, criss-crossed whip marks appeared on her snow-white back and buttocks. This image and sound appeared in a room of the White Armor Hotel at the same time. The room had a magic circle, just like the secret room of the city lord's mansion, so the sound would not leak out. As the only audience, Shinrui frowned as he watched this holographic image. The source of this image was the magic trace ring given to Sekali. The magic trace ring was indeed a legendary grade magic ring, but there was still a hidden function that Shinrui did not tell Sekali. That was, a 6-yuan ancient runes mirror teleportation circle was added in it. It could penetrate the interference of ordinary magic circles within an effective distance, and transmit the wearer's influence and voice to a certain medium to form a projection, such as the crystal ball in Shinrui's hand. Shinrui's main purpose was to find out the real Sekali, but what he didn't expect was to actually see such an X-rated blockbuster, and it was even a live broadcast. In the crystal ball, Sekali had already finished whipping. He untied his pants, pinched the woman's snow-white buttocks, and fiercely entered. He began a violent action without any gentleness. Since it was an omnidirectional projection, Shinrui could see very clearly that the Sir Lord entered seemed to be not an ordinary passage. In fact, the little demon girl at home occasionally used a certain part to serve him like this. The unusual novelty was really exciting. When he thought of the charming little demon girl, Chun-Rui, who had watched a live erotic scene for so long, couldn't help but lick his dry lips. It's better to monitor at another time. I can't stand it if I continue to watch like this. The candle in Sakali's hand was still dripping. The woman's back and buttocks were full of wax marks. Strangely, the scream in the woman's mouth seemed to be more happy than painful. The name in some wanton moans made Chun-Rui horrified. He dispelled the idea of turning off the projection for a while. "I'm not willing!" Sakali roared while performing the piston movement frantically. His twisted and indulgent expression was completely different from his usual elegant demeanor. "I want to become a true master. There is only one Sakali. Lucifer, and that is me. Damn Wheel of Hera." Sakali shook violently for a while. He threw away the burnt candle in his hand, came to the woman, grabbed her hair, pulled her face up, and put her under his waist. The woman's body was scarred, but she showed a coquettish look. She bit the object under the man's body and served him hard. Although the makeup on the woman's face had been washed away by tears and sweat, Chun-Rui still recognized the face. His heart was shocked. "It really is her. Damn it. Bah. It really is your sister." The connotation of this film is not only SM, but also this kind of messy relationship. Sakali didn't have the slightest compassion for the fairer sex. He grabbed the woman's hair and shook vigorously. The object that went deep almost pushed out her gastric juices. The woman was so uncomfortable that she wanted to vomit several times, but the coquettish look in her eyes was getting stronger and stronger. In the end, Sakali vented all his furious desire. His whole person seemed to be emptied. He fell to the ground on his back, gasping for breath. The torture device was automatically unlocked, and the woman was exhausted and limp on the ground. After a long time, the woman twisted her body and crawled over like a snake. She put her head to Sakali's already limp lower body. "Good brother, give me one more time, bitch! You only know how to be cheap!" Sakali sat up abruptly, grabbed her hair, and strangled the woman's throat madly. "I'll just drag you to death together!" Suddenly, a person appeared out of thin air in the secret room. With a wave of his hand, Sakali's hand that was strangling the woman suddenly loosened. At the same time, his body flew out a few meters involuntarily and slammed into the wall. This person's height and face were exactly the same as Sakali. Chun-Rui raised his eyes slightly. Judging from the power just now, this may be the peak stage of the Demon Emperor, Sakali. The woman coughed a few times, touched her neck, and slowly stood up. She twisted her waist and walked towards Sakali of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor. She did not avoid her naked body at all. "It turns out that this brother is better. Get lost, don't call me brother!" Sakali of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor glared at her like cold electricity. The woman couldn't help but shudder, and she didn't dare to approach for a while. Sakali of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor glanced at the woman and fell on Sakali, who was opposite. He said coldly, "I don't want to meddle in your affairs, but there is a limit to everything. You should understand." Sakali, who fell to the ground, seemed to have regained his senses. He slowly stood up and gritted his teeth. "Why are you pretending to be serious? Today's me is tomorrow's you. Do you think you can escape the fate of the Wheel of Hera?" Sakali of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor was silent for a moment. He ignored himself, opposite, and said to the woman, "You come with me. Didn't you tell me to get lost?" The woman sneered, but she walked towards Sakali, who was opposite. "My brother and sister game is not over yet." Sakali of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor snorted coldly, turned around, and his figure quickly disappeared. "Let's continue, good brother. I know you don't have much time." The woman came in front of Sakali, knelt down, and began to trick him. Sakali's eyes were a little more bloodshot as he stared at the direction where the peak stage of the Demon Emperor disappeared. He suddenly roared and grabbed the woman and pressed her against the wall. There were screams and moans in the room again. With a thought, Chun-Rui turned off the projection and didn't watch anymore. He fell into deep thought in the room. Chapter 511. Dark Moon City, Cloak Gang's Stronghold, Ancient House. It was already late at night. With the identity of Aguile, Chinray entered the backyard of the ancient house unimpeded all the way. The Dark Moon City was one of the 2 star points. With the powerful function of the Stargate, it only took a moment to return. The Sky and Xingxing families had already fallen asleep. Only Tatini's lab was still lit. After knocking on the door, Chinray saw potion bottles and instruments placed inside. Many of them were filled with steaming solutions that were bubbling. "You're back?" Tetanus asked casually. The old man thought that Chinray returned from the Moonlight Fortress at the front line. Of course, Chinray would not explain. He nodded and said, "I'm back for one night. I'll leave after finishing my business. I'm experimenting with the ingredients of the black potions. Look at these potions and formulas. Do you have any familiar memories?" The black potions that Chinray gave Tetanus were redeemed from the super system. The Grand Master Inheritance configuration was purely fictional. How would he know any formulas? He pretended to look at it and shook his head. "I was guided by the Grand Master's consciousness at the time. I have no memory of it. The black potions are endless. Now I'm just faintly touching the edge, but unfortunately I can't get in." The old man sighed regretfully. Chinray thought of the situation when he took the black potions back then, and he said, "Teacher, you can try to drink the potions and savor the wonderful feeling. Maybe you can have new discoveries." Of course I thought about it, but these black potions are too precious. I need to keep them for analysis. Before he finished speaking, the old man's eyes suddenly widened. He saw black potions appearing in Chinray's hands one after another, and he put them on the table. "These are all the true potions that were configured some time ago. Teacher can try it. Don't be reluctant." "Good Lord!" Tatini's eyes suddenly burst into a fiery light as if these cold potion bottles were old lovers that he had not seen for a long time. Seeing that the old man was about to jump into the experiment excitedly, Chinray quickly protected the potions and said his intention first. "I rushed back to the Dark Moon overnight because I have an urgent matter to ask teacher." "Make a long story short," the old man responded, but his eyes were staring at the potion behind Chinray's hand. "Teacher, have you heard of the Wheel of Hera?" "Wheel of Hera?" Tetanus was startled. "This is an ancient pseudo-artifact." "Why do you ask this?" "Pseudo-divine artifact?" Chinray seemed to have heard of this term in some ancient books. "Teacher, to tell you the truth, I'm going on a secret mission this time. I'm not going to the front line. In this mission, I found some key clues involving the Wheel of Hera, so I specially returned to ask the teacher for advice." Tetanus recalled for a moment and explained. In the general concept of mechanics, magic equipment was divided into 3 levels: high grade, excellent grade, and legendary grade. Above legendary grade was artifact. In fact, there were some powerful pieces of equipment that surpassed the legendary grade but did not reach the standard of a divine artifact. They were called pseudo-divine artifacts. A pseudo-divine artifact was quite close to an artifact in some attributes. It was no longer something that a mechanic master could make. At least a quasi-grand master like Tetanus was needed. Even for Tetanus, it was quite difficult to successfully make a pseudo-divine artifact. At the level of a pseudo-divine artifact and above, the percentage bonus of the equipment is no longer the biggest standard to measure the value, but the attribute that has undergone a qualitative change. For example, I remember that there is a life chain that can increase lifespan by 20% and delay aging. The actual significance of this 20% is very different from those that increase attack and defense by 40%. Speaking of these, Tetanus spoke with confidence and assurance, as if he was familiar with it. Chinray kept nodding. His God-eating mask actually had no bonus effect, but the powerful function was by no means comparable to the legendary grade equipment. Just as there are good and bad legendary grade equipment, there are also strong and weak pseudo-divine artifacts and artifacts. The Wheel of Hera is said to be a failed work of an ancient artifact. Although it is only a pseudo-divine artifact, it contains powerful power that is far beyond the average pseudo-divine artifact. In a sense, it can even be comparable to an artifact. The Wheel of Hera also has a name called the Wheel of Faith. Its strongest function is to absorb the power of faith and transform it into the user's own strength. The power of faith? This familiar term surprised Shinrui. The Wheel of Hera can actually absorb and transform the power of faith. Isn't it similar to the Super System's Tower of Faith? The demon realm actually has such a thing. Shinrui suddenly remembered the almost crazy worship of Lord Sikali by the people in the White Feather Estate. His heart moved, and he faintly understood some reasons. Tetanus continued to explain. In the inherited memory that he received, the power of faith could only be possessed by gods. Even the demigod powerhouse could only accumulate and perceive the power of faith in a certain specific territory. Therefore, the power of faith absorbed by the Wheel of Hera could not be directly absorbed by people below the demigod powerhouse. A special medium was needed. The owner of the Wheel of Hera could find the most suitable person among the believers through the sensing of this pseudo-divine artifact. Through the transformation of the Wheel of Hera, the person would become a clone that retained independent consciousness and power. After these clones absorbed the power of faith, their strength would grow rapidly. In this growth process, the owner of the Wheel of Hera would also benefit at the same time. After reaching a certain limit, the owner of the Wheel of Hera would absorb all the life and power of the clone through the method of devouring to obtain all the power transformed by the power of faith. The clone and the main body were equivalent to an inviolable master-slave contract. They couldn't resist the devouring of the main body, and they couldn't even escape. Shinrui finally figured out the function of the Wheel of Hera. Just like MLM, the benefits earned by the offline will be distributed to the online. Not only that, but the offline will also be devoured as a tonic in the end. From the perspective of the function of increasing strength, the Wheel of Hera was indeed comparable to the artifact. In this way, the two Sikali I encountered were not the real White Feather Estate Lord, but the tonic, waiting to be devoured. The one who was playing brother and sister SM in the secret room should be a clone that was about to be devoured. No wonder there was that kind of hysterical madness. Then, the real Sikali's strength should still be above the peak stage of the Demon Emperor clone, Demon Overlord level. What a White Feather Estate Lord! He actually hid so deeply. If it weren't for the rise of the Dark Moon, the White Feather Estate would be the most powerful estate of the fallen Angel Empire. Teacher, look at this sword. Shinrui thought of one thing. Is this a pseudo-artifact or an artifact? After Tetanus answered the question of the Wheel of Hera, he originally wanted to continue to study the potion. When he heard this, he immediately turned around and saw the North Sea sword in Shinrui's hand. His eyes widened again. After listening to Shinrui's explanation of the function, the old man took out the instrument again and carefully identified it. He praised, "This craftsmanship is simply flawless. Even an artifact is nothing more than this. Moreover, the blood drop ownership recognition ritual already belongs to the category of an artifact. Unfortunately, it still cannot reach the level of a real artifact. It can only be regarded as a pseudo-artifact, a very powerful pseudo-artifact." Shinrui nodded. After listening to Tetanus explain the concept of pseudo-artifact in detail, he had already vaguely guessed the answer. The system-produced equipment, North Sea, Judgment, and Thunderous Sound, should all belong to the category of pseudo-artifact. He immediately thought about it and asked, "What about the 7 artifacts of the demon realm? Is it a real artifact?" "Of course," the old man said without hesitation. "The 7 artifacts are, of course, real artifacts, and they are the most powerful artifacts. According to some ancient records, even the gods fear them. However, it seems that the 7 artifacts need to be gathered together in order to unleash their true power. If it is just one of them alone, it may be comparable to an ordinary artifact, or even a pseudo-artifact. The problem is that the 7 artifacts can only be used by the corresponding royal bloodline. There is no mixed bloodline in the demon realm, so naturally, no one can use more than one of the 7 artifacts at the same time, so this has always been a mystery." Shinrui suddenly realized. It turns out that the 7 artifacts together are the real strongest artifacts. No wonder the sword of fallen angel, illusionary demon shield, dark shadow cloak. These happen to be a complete set of equipment. As long as the 7 artifacts are gathered, I can have the power to compete with the gods. Titanus said that no one can use more than 1 artifact, but it was not the biggest problem for Chenrui because he now had 2. To be precise, 1.5 artifacts. I just don't know if the right to use the artifacts cracked by the super system is actually a kind of cheating. Does it meet the standards of the integration of the 7 artifacts? Chenrui shook his head. Now is not the time to think about this. Now that I have gotten the answer about the Wheel of Hera, it seems that I need to make some corresponding preparations. Teacher, don't look at this sword. This is my life-saving thing. You should study the black potions first. Humph. Mysterious kid, if you have nothing to do, then get lost. When Chenrui returned to the house, he saw a charming figure sitting in the garden under the purple moonlight, holding a plucked flower in her hand. The voice of the succubus maid muttered to herself in a low voice. I don't know how he is outside. Does he miss me more or Athena and Rala more? Or does he miss Princess Royal? Kia Athena, Rala, Princess Royal, Kia Athena. The poor petals fell one by one in the hands of the little maid, and finally, there was only one piece left. The little maid was startled. Princess Royal? No. So another innocent flower was plucked, and it fell in the hands of the little maid. Athena, Kia, Rala, Princess Royal, Athena? The little maid looked depressed. If I knew, I wouldn't have changed the position. As she was about to continue picking flowers, she suddenly turned back vigilantly, and she saw a smiling face that she thought about day and night appearing behind her. The little maid couldn't believe her eyes. She wiped them hard, and her eyes became more and more surprised. She threw herself into the arms of the man. Chenrui, you are back. I have something important to do, so I came back for a while. I will leave soon. Chenrui stroked the soft wings of the little maid. Has the capital's army started to attack the Dark Moon? Athena and the others are not here. And Athena, Paglio, Oliphius and Lomond went to the Moonlight Fortress. Crobolus and Delia are in the palace. By the way, I just received the news that the capital's army suffered a big loss in the first battle at the Moonlight Fortress, and they were forced to retreat. Athena has made a great contribution this time. It doesn't matter if you have made a contribution, the key is safety. Chenrui secretly breathed a sigh of relief and asked, What about Rala? Is she in the Rainbow Valley? I just came back, and I only know to ask Athena and Rala. I know that my status is low, my strength is not good, and I can't compare to them. The little maid's eyes were filled with tears, and she looked lovely. Stop it. Chenrui knew the character of the troublesome little maid. He gently twisted the delicate face. I have an urgent matter to look for Rala, and I have to go back later. The little maid asked shyly. It's so late, let's go tomorrow. I'm a little scared alone. This is obviously a poor excuse. Looking at the succubus maid's expectant look, Chenrui's heart softened, and he nodded. For a long time, in order to get recognition, Kia was willing to be a small follower beside Athena. She often advanced and retreated together, and it was rare for her to be alone with her. Anyway, returning to the White Feather Estate was just opening the teleportation portal. There should be enough time. Chenrui suddenly remembered the X-rated scene in some kind of projection not long ago, and his heart was hot. His hand couldn't help but grab the back of the elastic buttocks, and he said a few words in the little maid's ear. The little maid's buttocks trembled slightly, and she clamped it a little tight. Her face blushed, and her eyes were full of seductive brilliance. She bit her lip and replied, "Anne, go take a fragrant bath, then wait for me in the room." Chenrui smiled, touched it again, and walked toward the teleportation portal in the Rainbow Valley. The little maid blushed, and she pulled the innocent petals with joy. When there was only one petal left, she showed a little proud smile. Kia! Chenrui entered the Rainbow Valley and found Rala in the lab. When the fairy Miss Long saw Chenrui, she was also surprised. Shenrui briefly stated his intention. I want to ask you to help improve a rune prop last time. It may be useful at some critical moments. Ask me? There seemed to be a trace of dissatisfaction behind Rala's glasses. Do you have to be so polite? Yes, ask my beloved Rala to do it herself. Shenrui winked at her and hugged the fairy Miss Long's slender waist from behind. Oh. The fairy Miss Long also responded happily in her heart, and the little dissatisfaction disappeared in an instant. If you are in a hurry to use it, I will start now. I can succeed in one night, but this kind of prop can only be used once. You have to be careful. Shenrui nodded. Time is tight now, so I have to trouble you. Remember not to work too hard on the usual research. When the capital's matter is over, I will be your assistant again, and we can experiment together. And the fairy Miss Long nodded. She felt warm in her heart. It felt so good. How's the research on Zeri last time? Zeri was a prop that Shenrui bought at the Red Spirit Estates Town Mordo's trade fair. Its power was amazing. He had used 2 of them, and the remaining one was given to Rala for research. He hoped to imitate more. There are some results. In addition to triggering the dragon inscription, it actually contains at least 12 yuan of ancient rune engravings. Due to material problems, I only succeeded in making 5 replicas, and the power is much inferior. You can use it first. The fairy Miss Long was obviously not satisfied with her results. She took out the replica and took the prop handed over by Shenrui. She broke free from his embrace. Okay, now I have to concentrate on making it. You go rest first. Rala was quite focused on research work, so Shenrui did not disturb her. He quietly left the Rainbow Valley and returned to the yard. He happened to see the little maid's room with the light on. She was obviously waiting for him after washing up. His eyes lit up, and he walked toward the house. I came with sincerity, and I hope to hear the truest answer. Shenrui secretly rejoiced. If he hadn't witnessed the X-rated blockbuster last night, especially when he heard the conversation between the 2 Cicalis, he would still be skeptical about the intention of this Sir Lord's sudden visit today. Now that he understood the mystery of the Wheel of Hera, he had a clear idea in his heart. There was a saying that desperate patients would turn to any doctor. This Cicali should be a clone that was about to be devoured. At the critical moment of life and death, it was naturally difficult for him to stay calm. It could be seen from the conversation in yesterday's meeting, not to mention the hysterical tyranny and venting in the secret room. Shenrui maintained a smile. Pay and return are often equal. It depends on how much Sir Lord can pay. For example, even if Sir wants to get tens of thousands of years of lifespan, it is not a problem. As long as you can afford enough price, you can move a dragon to sign a symbiotic contract with you. If Master Poison Dragon heard this sentence, he would definitely beat his chest and stamp his feet. He sold it at a low cost. Cicali nodded noncommittally. It's not that I don't believe in Sir's ability, but facts are more convincing than empty talk. What do you think? Shenrui asked calmly. Yes, I just don't know what kind of facts Sir needs. After this fact is confirmed, what kind of answer will Sir give me? Cicali said in a deep voice. To be honest with Sir, I have a very urgent matter that I want to seek Sir's help, but before that, I need Sir to prove your ability. This time, Shenrui did not beat around the bush. Sir, please speak. There are some accidents in the Lobe mine in the Cold Mist Swamp east of the White Feather Estate. I want to trouble Sir to solve it. If Sir can solve this problem within 10 days, I will not only give Sir a satisfactory reward, but this will also become the beginning of our real cooperation. Shenrui was not sure if this matter was related to the Wheel of Hera. The Dark Moon's war was fierce now. Although he won a small victory in the Moonlight Fortress, it was more because Obsidian underestimated the enemy. In the next battle, the pressure faced by the Moonlight Fortress would definitely be greater. It was impossible to stop the fierce attack of millions of troops with the existing defense and troops, so the steps of the plan must be pushed forward as soon as possible. However, Shenrui believed that this Sikali did not have much time left. Even if the lobe mine was just a test, as long as this matter was completed, it would definitely become Sikali's life-saving straw and touch the biggest secret of the White Feather Estate. Okay. Sir, please provide detailed information about the lobe mine. The other party's straightforward reply made Sikali happy. He took out a ring. The information is in the ring. Due to some special circumstances, the Lord's mansion is not suitable for us to meet. If Sir completes the task, you can take this ring to the arena fan shop to find the owner, Tracy. He will arrange everything. I will complete this commission as soon as possible. Don't worry. Shinrei nodded and took the ring. Then I will wait for Sir's good news. Sikali stood up, activated a certain magic item, changed back to the appearance of a servant, and left the hotel. The lobe mine was located in the cold mist swamp in the west of the White Feather Estate. It was a dangerous place rich in rare ores. It would take at least 2 days to get there by carriage, and the fastest flying demonic beast would only take 1 day. Shinrui rode on a griffin that he got, looked back at the southern sky, and gently stroked a red rope on his wrist. This red rope did not have a special magic attribute, but it was personally tied by Athena for him at the beginning. Then, without hesitation, he patted the griffin and rushed toward the west. He flapped his wings and flew away. In a blink of an eye, a day had passed, and the night fell silently. The quiet purple moonlight shone on the broken walls of the Moonlight Fortress. The Flame Legion flag soaked in blood fluttered slightly in the night wind, showing an inexplicable desolation and loneliness. The thick smoke of the fortress had been extinguished, and the corpses on the battlefield had been cleared by the tacit cooperation of both sides. The deathly silent atmosphere formed a sharp contrast with the fierce battle of blood and fire during the day. This was the second attack of the Capital Coalition Army on the Moonlight Fortress. Since the secret weapons such as the Dark Moon's Demon Overlord powerhouse, magic crystal cannons, and guardian vines had been exposed in the first battle, the Capital's attack this time was much more cautious. They also sent powerhouses to specifically target the 2 Demon Overlord-level dragons of the Dark Moon. However, Obsidian still underestimated the power of Paglio. The 3 powerhouses of the peak stage of the Demon Overlord actually lost to Paglio and Oliphius. Not only that, the strength of the Dark Moon's garrison was also beyond Obsidian's imagination. With the advantage of the fortress, they withstood the waves of onslaught of the coalition army. After paying a heavy price but still unable to break through the defense of the fortress, Obsidian finally ordered to stop the attack. The casualties of the Dark Moon in this battle were also very shocking. With the military strength and facilities of the fortress, it was not easy to hold on to this step. The so-called zero casualties were just an ideal myth in this kind of head-on battlefield. The real war was not as great as described in the poem. Its essence was the mutual slaughter and trampling of lives driven by interests and desires. The reason why Obsidian retreated was not because of the awareness of life, but because he listened to Josh's opinion and planned to launch a raid at night. The visibility at night was low, and the attack power of the fortress's magic crystal cannons and archers would be greatly reduced. Relatively speaking, the target of the fortress was much more obvious. After these 2 fierce battles, the Moonlight Fortress had no secrets to speak of. They only needed to change a batch of fresh troops to take down the fortress in one fell swoop. A lot of black mist began to appear in front of the fortress, and it was impossible to see the situation inside. This was the dark sky curtain, created by the Magician Legion. It could confuse the opponent's vision and cover up the sound in the black mist. The fortress's garrison didn't seem to notice these dark sky curtain. There was no response until the black mist gradually dissipated. This time, it was actually just a test. When the second dark sky curtain was launched, the 3 elite legions under the personal leadership of the new deputy commander, Pallor, had already sneaked over under the cover of the dark sky curtain. There were number 36 stratagems in the demon realm, but many things were interconnected. This trick did have the essence of deceiving everyone. Pallor patiently ordered the army to move slowly with the dark sky curtain, until they were close to the fortress. Then he shouted to attack the fortress. At the same time, the 2 legions in the air also quickly dispatched. The strange thing was that the Moonlight Fortress still did not respond, as if it was an empty city. Yes, it was really an empty city. The Dark Moon garrison has evacuated the fortress? Obsidian frowned. His carefully planned heavy punch seemed to have hit the air, but no matter what, this fortress was finally taken down. Josh took the lead to speak. Your Highness's surprise attack strategy is really wise, but the enemy is quite cunning. They know that they can't resist the power of our army, so they chose to escape. The lords also complimented one after another, indicating that at least one victory had been achieved and the Moonlight Fortress had been captured. The scout in front reported, Your Highness, the enemy is currently fleeing in a panic. General Pallor requests to pursue the victory and break through Town Daiko in one fell swoop. Obsidian's eyes lit up, and the lords agreed one after another. Only Geraint, who had been dismissed from the position of deputy commander, said, Your Highness, the Dark Moon is cunning. If we pursue rashly, I'm afraid there is a trap. We must be cautious. Your Highness, what General Geraint said is not unreasonable. Josh continued, It's just that the terrain of Town Daiko is different from that of the Moonlight Fortress. The front is mainly mountainous. As long as there is the cooperation of the Air Legion, even if the enemy has an ambush along the way, we can see through it. Behind Town Daiko is a plain that can go straight to Town Leith. For our army, the plain terrain is the best to exert its power. After occupying Town Daiko, Town Leith will be within our reach. This is just my personal opinion. It is up to your Highness to make a decision. Josh's analysis strengthened Obsidian's confidence. He nodded. Order Pallor to pursue the victory and capture Town Daiko. The Dragon Rider Legion will return, and the Flying Cloud Legion will assist in the pursuit. In addition to the 2 dragons during the day, the Dark Moon's demon overlords should also have the traitors Crobolus and Venom. Legraros, Stiller, you guys go to help Pallor. Even if the opponent's demon overlords come out, we can still match them. With our military strength, it is not difficult to solve the Dark Moon's defeated army and Town Daiko's garrison. Everyone praised the regent for his wisdom. Geraint still wanted to persuade again, but Obsidian glared at him coldly. He sighed secretly and stopped talking. Chapter 513. Under the leadership of Rometi, the capital's Flying Cloud Legion crossed the occupied Moonlight Fortress and flew in the direction of Town Daiko. Pallor led the 3 legions to maintain a certain speed and formation to follow behind. The main task of the Air Force was to search for ambushes along the way to prevent ambushes, but out of fear of the 2 giant dragons of the Dark Moon, they did not dare to rush straight to Town Daiko unscrupulously. Instead, they spread out in formation and explored cautiously. From time to time, they dropped the Illumination Light Ball. The Illumination Light Ball was a simple magic item. The light source could stay for a period of time. It was often used in night battles, but it could not break magic like the dark sky. Although the Illumination Light Ball could detect the hiding place of the ambushes and defeated soldiers, this large area of dispersion would definitely let Town Daiko notice the approach of the capital army. However, Pallor was not ambushing Town Daiko this time, but he was brazenly attacking, so he didn't care about this at all. The 3 elite legions he led were not the stragglers brought by those lords, but the truly powerful and well-equipped elites. Not only that, there were 4 demon overlord powerhouses in the legion, so Pallor was confident enough to lead the 3 elite legions to flatten Town Daiko, then directly break through to Town Leith to make a great contribution to the coalition army. He could prove to the regent and all the lords that Royal Highness Obsidian's removal of Geraint and appointment of Pallor Tustin as the deputy commander of the coalition army was the most correct decision. If he could pacify the Dark Moon estate in one fell swoop, with this achievement, it was not impossible to squeeze out Geraint and ascend to the position of the 3rd general. General Rometi sent a message. No enemy ambush or defeated soldiers were found in front of Town Daiko. The Flying Cloud Legion is currently on standby at the hill not far from the town. Hearing that there were no ambushes, Pallor secretly thought that it was as expected. He nodded. These Dark Moon cowards run fast. It seems that they have evacuated the Moonlight Fortress early in the morning. At this time, Town Daiko should be on standby. However, this time we are not sneak attacking, but a frontal attack. I can't wait for these guys to fight. Pass my order, speed up the march and rush to the hill as fast as possible. Soon after, the army arrived at the hill. Looking at the brightly lit Town Daiko in the distance, Pallor pointed with his long sword. Soldiers, the enemy who fled from the Moonlight Fortress is in the town ahead. I only have one sentence. At dawn, I want to drink wine with the enemy's skulls in the center of Town Daiko with all my comrades. Kill! 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 The soldiers raised their weapons and shouted in unison. The elite troops were well equipped, and their armors had special luminous markings to prevent them from accidentally injuring their own people in the low-visibility environment. Seeing that the morale was high, Pallor immediately ordered the attack. The 1st Legion and the Flying Cloud Legion quickly rushed to Town Daiko. The frontline soldiers tossed out grenade-like objects, destroying and triggering the defensive magic arrays in front of them. Even so, there were still many interlocking and hidden defensive matrices that were activated. Amidst the explosions, waves of fire and sparks flashed, reflecting the figures of fallen soldiers. However, this did not stop the resolute footsteps of these elites at all, and they were quickly broken through. The town began to shout loudly. The lights of many residential houses were extinguished, and the pouring rain of arrows shrouded the sky. However, Town Daiko was not the Moonlight Fortress. If there were no ambushes along the way, the terrain of this town alone did not have much defensive advantage. The capital elite soldiers wearing high-quality equipment were not the cannon-fodder army of those lords. Although the arrows were dense, facing the defense of the solid shields and armors, they could not cause the expected damage. The guards of Town Daiko desperately resisted, but the impact of the capital elite army was extremely powerful. Coupled with the pincer attack of the Flying Cloud Legion in the air, the Dark Moon guards were forced to retreat step by step. Soon, the front line of defense was collapsed, and the capital army poured into Town Daiko like a tide. At this time, a dragon roar sounded, and the few griffin beasts at the front instantly turned into flying ashes. The nearby griffin beasts fled in fear. It was obviously the 2 giant dragons of the Dark Moon. The terrifying poison dragon at the front was the terrifying poison dragon. After scaring away the nearby griffin cavalry, a dragon breath sprayed toward the capital soldiers below. However, at this time, there was a sudden chill. The flying speed of the dragon breath suddenly slowed down, and it finally solidified into ice. It fell to the ground and shattered. It only poisoned a dozen soldiers who were splashed by the debris. A white-haired woman with an old face appeared in the air instantly. She was holding a magic wand that emitted a faint silver light in her hand. She pointed at the dragon in front of her, and a small hurricane appeared and flew toward Paglio. This woman was the peak stage of the demon overlord, Stiller, one of the strongest demon overlords in the Elder family. She was once the top magician under the Lord of Midnight Sun and the most powerful trump card in Obsidian's hands. Stiller had observed the poison dragon's battle during the day, so she cast a targeted magic as soon as she came up. This hurricane was deliberately controlled to be very pocket-sized, but Paglio could clearly feel the powerful magic contained in it. Before the hurricane approached, the nearby airflow had been distorted uncontrollably. It seemed a little difficult to fly. If it was a blue dragon who was good at the wind element, this hurricane would just be showing off in front of an expert. It could dissipate in a breath, but Paglio was a poison dragon who was good at physical attacks and poison. He was still at a disadvantage when facing the magician. This was also the reason why he was restrained by the fairy dragon Rala. Paglio knew that the dragon body was too huge, and he could easily become a living target in front of the magician. His figure immediately flickered, and he turned into a human again. He waved his fists like lightning, and the terrifying wind pressure formed by the fist force actually split the hurricane in half. This method of breaking magic with brute force made Stiller secretly shocked, But as a veteran demon overlord who had experienced hundreds of battles, she did not panic. She waved the magic wand in her hand, and countless crisscross translucent magic crystals appeared around Paglio. From the distorted and refracted light around the poison dragon, it could be seen that this seemed to be layers of ice cages. Paglio still attacked directly with one magic to break all magic. The terrifying power turned the cages into powder, but Stiller kept replenishing and reinforcing the cages at the expense of her spirit power. It was impossible to eliminate Paglio with this kind of fighting method. Stiller's purpose was obvious. She wanted to delay the enemy's most powerful combat power. The Black Dragon and the Crystal Dragon were the absolute nemesis of the magician. Unfortunately, Oliphius was facing a huge test. She was facing two enemies who were good at physical attacks. One was Barocco of the peak stage of the Demon Overlord, and the other was Stebble of the intermediate stage of the Demon Overlord. Barocco and Oliphius had fought during the day. Although the Black Miss Long's small realm was inferior, with the innate powerful strength of the dragons, they were evenly matched for a while. Now that there was Stebble, the Black Miss Long could only flee. However, the Black Miss Long was very clever. She knew that her flying speed was faster than the opponent, so she did not fight head-on. Instead, she fled in circles in the direction of Paglio. From time to time, they would take care of each other. The situation became a tug-of-war. The Dark Moon's powerhouse was restrained and unable to exert their power. The garrison below was even more unable to stop the impact of the capital army. They were forced to release a large number of dark sky and began to evacuate. A small part still used the buildings and the dark sky as cover to resist stubbornly. Seeing that victory was in sight, Pallor no longer hesitated and led the army into town Daiko. The Dark Moon's garrison was defeated and retreated on all fronts. The two dragons in the distant sky also began to retreat while fighting. Don't relax! The Flying Cloud Legion and the First Legion break into the dark sky and continue to pursue the enemy. Intercept and kill the enemy as much as possible before they escape to Town Leith. Flying Cloud Legion, pay attention to the ambush. The Second Legion will be divided into 10 teams of 500 people each, led by the captain. They will search and eliminate the remaining enemy soldiers that may be hiding in the town. Duroi, take a team to find the mayor of Town Daiko. If the mayor is not there, the other officials will do. Then, quickly settle the townspeople. If there is any disobedience, kill without mercy. Pallor ordered one after another. He was secretly proud in his heart. This time, he took downtown Daiko and earned face for the regent. Great merit is definitely inevitable. The position of the deputy commander will also become more and more stable. Soon, a soldier reported, "General Pallor!" General Duroi was ordered to find the mayor, but he searched all the nearby houses continuously. He couldn't even find an ordinary townspeople. Not a single person can be found. Pallor frowned. This town is not small. From the previous intelligence, the population is quite large. The civilians should not all evacuate. Otherwise, they will only become a burden. Could it be that these townspeople are concentrated and hiding somewhere? General Duroi is currently sending soldiers to search separately. As soon as he finished speaking, a house exploded violently. Countless soldiers who were caught off guard nearby were killed and injured. This explosion seemed to have triggered a chain reaction. All the houses in this area exploded one after another. As the earth shook, the severed limbs were flying. The bursting flames illuminated the terrified faces of the capital soldiers. "All soldiers, leave the house!" Pallor yelled. Even the voice condensed by Demon Emperor-level power still seemed weak and powerless in the deafening explosion. Finally, the explosion subsided. After the smoke and dust dispersed, they saw that all the buildings within a radius of hundreds of meters were razed to the ground. This kind of explosion power could not be achieved by ordinary magic items. At least 3,000 soldiers were killed in this terrifying explosion, and more were injured. These lunatics of the Dark Moon! Pallor gritted his teeth and cursed as he gathered the army. While arranging the treatment of the wounded. "General! Bad news! Durue hurried over out of breath. A large number of enemy troops have appeared in the dark sky, around the town. We are surrounded. Surrounded? Are you sure? Pallor was so shocked that he almost thought he heard it wrong. Excluding the First Legion and the Flying Cloud Legion that pursued the enemy, the existing Second Legion and Third Legion have 150,000 people. In this terrain, to surround them, it takes at least 3 times the number of troops. Nearly 500,000 troops. Where did the Dark Moon get so many troops? Undead! It's the army of undead! Chapter 5:14. Under the dim moonlight, the dark sky that enveloped town Daiko gradually dissipated. In the thin black mist, the hidden fangs gradually became clear. In all directions there was a dense swarm of dead souls, as if there was an endless sea. The capital army's scalp tingled. The number of the capital army was originally one of the advantages of the capital army, but now it had become a disadvantage. Pallor understood a little. The reason for the house explosion just now was not only to kill and injure his soldiers, but also to clear a large open space without cover, which was convenient for the encirclement and annihilation tactics. He suddenly thought of the previous soldiers' report that all the houses were empty. Could it be that all the townspeople have become undead? Even though Pallor had always been ruthless, he couldn't help but shudder. Don't panic! It's just a group of trash skeletons. Their fragile skeletons can't withstand the sharpest blades in our hands at all. The poor rusty knives can't even leave a trace on our solid armor. Pallor calmed down and began to boost the morale loudly. We are the strongest elites of the capital. How can we be afraid of these trash who are only worthy of being cannon fodder on the battlefield? Soldiers, the enemies of the Dark Moon have fled with their tails between their legs. We are just worried that there is no place to earn more credit. Exert your strongest power and crush these skeletons. Needless to say, these capital generals were good at boosting morale. The soldiers' fighting spirit suddenly rose again. Although most people had no experience in fighting the undead, everyone knew that the undead most commonly used the skeleton C tactic, which was to use the number of skeleton soldiers as cannon fodder to consume the enemy. Skeletons were the lowest level undead creatures. Their own combat power was not worth mentioning. With the combat power of the capital army, it should not be a problem to defend or even launch counterattacks. Under the command of Pallor, the capital army formed a huge phalanx, confronting a large number of enemies that were slowly moving over. The dark sky had completely disappeared. Although the moonlight was not very bright, the soldiers could see the appearance of the undead army clearly with the help of the fire in the house and the illumination light balls. Many people took a deep breath in unison. It was indeed a skeleton sea, but these skeletons were too unexpected. Cannon fodder on the battlefield? Fragile skeletons? Per rusty knives? The helmets and iron armor on the skeletons could only be equipped by the heavy infantry known as tortoise shell. They were uniformly equipped with thick round shields and bright scimitars. Damn! The equipment of a regular infantry army was only SOSO. Pallor was also stunned. Was this the weakest skeleton soldier? All the skeletons were equipped with the same standard of weapons and armor. How much would that cost? Now is not the time to laugh at or lament that the Dark Moon estate is rich and stupid. With so many well-equipped undead soldiers, I'm afraid it will be the biggest nightmare tonight. Ha ha! The strange laughter echoed in town Daiko. The laughter seemed to come from dozens of people in all directions, but the voice and tone were from one person, revealing a shuddering horror. So many materials for making undead, it's so good! Slaves, help your future companions get rid of the excess flesh on their bodies. The speed of the skeletons gradually accelerated, rushing from all directions to the capital army's phalanx. For a time, the sound of weapons colliding was endless, mixed with the roars and screams of the soldiers. As soon as they collided, the outermost edge of the phalanx had been shaved off a layer. The pressure brought by the skeleton sea was far beyond the imagination of the soldiers. Not only the equipment was powerful, but their strength was also not weak. What was more terrifying was the attributes of the undead. They didn't know fatigue or fear at all, let alone feel pain. Unless the core of the head was destroyed, the damage to the rest of the body did not have much effect. Even if their hands and feet were broken, as long as the scimitars in their hands were still there, they could still kill people without being affected. These elite soldiers of the capital were well trained. Although they were facing the terrifying impact of the undead army, they still maintained a high level of mental state and combat power. As soon as there were casualties, someone would immediately replace them. Although the losses were not light, they always maintained a defensive formation. In the center of the phalanx, Deputy General Dure kept mobilizing and commanding, gradually turning the phalanx that could attack and defend into a purely defensive circular formation. Pallor had a solemn expression as he paid close attention to the battle situation in all directions. "General Pallor, do you need me to take action now?" Pegasus, the demon overlord powerhouse who had been protecting Pallor, spoke. "Not for the time being." Pallor was not mediocre. He pondered for a moment and shook his head. "The dark moon is indeed hidden deeply. It is much more difficult to deal with than I thought. Not only there are 2 powerful demon overlord dragons, but there is also such a terrifying number of undead army. I miscalculated this time. Obviously, the enemy has been planning for a long time. Now that Sir Stebble and the others have been lured away, the only demon overlord powerhouse left on our side is Sir Pegasus. I know that Sir is one of the few powerhouses in the royal family. You practice both martial arts and magic. You can challenge the peak stage of the demon overlord with the strength of the intermediate stage of the demon overlord, but the current situation outside is unclear. I don't know if the enemy has other means, so Sir should not act rashly. If you waste your power in vain or are restrained by the enemy, it will only make the situation of our army more dangerous. These undead must be controlled by the magician who made the sound just now. Undead magicians are generally very cunning and will hide somewhere. Sir, please endure and observe for the time being. Try to find out where the magician is hiding, then please do your best to eliminate the enemy leader in one fell swoop. As long as the magician dies, this undead army will automatically collapse." Pegasus showed agreement. General is right. To be able to control so many skeletons, this person's strength is at least close to the demon overlord level. I will gradually extend the territory power to try to sense and search for the opponent's controller. Due to the large number of enemies, this requires considerable spirit power and time. I can help General in a short time. Sir, please rest assured to use your power. Don't worry about being disturbed. Our army can still withstand it at present. Pegasus nodded, sat down cross-legged, and closed his eyes. The formation of more than 100,000 people was not so easy to change. Moreover, it was still in battle. Fortunately, Dure had good command and changed it in the shortest time. However, under the fierce attack of the undead, the circle shrank a little. Although the soldiers in the circle used bows and arrows to shoot, it did not have a good effect on the undead. There was a magician squad of 80 people in the capital legion. The magic attack was much more threatening to the undead than the bows and arrows, but for the large number of skeleton soldiers, it was just a drop in the bucket. After releasing a few magic spells in a row, the magicians could not cast magic again in a short time because of the exhaustion of magic power. Just as the magician stopped, there were continuous sounds of bowstrings in the direction of the undead army. Arrows were flying all over the sky, causing a lot of casualties. They even killed a few magicians who were caught off guard. Dure, who was commanding the battle, was shocked. The undead army actually has archers? These undead archers used powerful, high-quality arrows, which made up for their lack of accuracy. Speaking of accuracy, the undead weren't afraid of accidental injuries at all. It didn't matter if the arrows hit their own people, as they would still be alive and kicking. A soldier's spear accurately pierced the heart of a skeleton soldier with an arrow on the opposite side. However, this conventional fatal attack had no effect on the skeleton. The skeleton soldier let the skeleton in its heart be shattered by the spear. It rushed forward without slowing down and slashed the soldier's shoulder with a knife. The sharp blade cut through the leather armor and was embedded in the soldier's shoulder blade. Blood immediately soaked the clothes. Before the soldier could pull out the knife, a soldier next to him struggled and cut the skeleton's arm in two. The skeleton that had lost its scimitar was still fierce. It hit the head of the soldier whose shoulder was injured with a shield. Before the soldier could wake up from the dizziness, another skeleton's scimitar arrived and cut off half of the soldier's head. Blood and brains splashed on the face of the soldier next to him. The soldier's line of sight was blocked. He hurriedly used the shield to protect his body, but there was a pain in his foot. A skeleton with only half of its body left cut off his right knee. He immediately screamed and fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, he had been cut into several pieces. As soon as the companions in the back row came up, they were shot to the ground by the rain of arrows from the air. The skeleton soldiers with arrows shot by their own people on their backs were unaffected and continued to rush forward fiercely. This scene was just a small microcosm of the battle. These skeletons did not have independent consciousness. The movements of their hands were very monotonous. There were only two kinds of slashes and shield attacks. They didn't even know how to defend. However, it was this simple attack movement and immortality that caused the capital army to suffer huge losses. According to this consumption, the capital army would definitely be the first to be destroyed. At this time, a group of figures appeared in the skeleton team. These figures looked similar to ordinary people. Their bodies were thin, and the parts below the knees seemed to have no substance. They floated forward, which looked very strange. What is that? Why is there no damage at all when the sword slashes over? Bows and arrows are useless. Is it an immortal body? Be careful. This is a ghost. It will greatly reduce physical damage. Damn it, there are so many ghosts. Ghosts were undead creatures transformed from the dead with strong spirit power when they were alive. They had a strong immunity to physical damage. Sometimes, they could be completely immune. For an ordinary army, they were definitely an immortal nightmare. The best way to deal with ghosts was the magician's attack, but now there were only a few dozen magicians who were almost exhausted. After a magician barely cast a thunderfall, he fainted because of the overdraft of spirit power. In the front row, a demon king-level captain who practiced both magic and martial arts had a lot of arrows stuck in his armor. Seeing that all the soldiers under his command were dead, he shouted angrily. The weapon in his hand glowed with dazzling light as he rushed into the enemy's formation. With a big move, the ghosts and skeletons within 10 meters disappeared and shattered. However, the blank space that was cleared was filled by the undead in the blink of an eye. The general who couldn't retreat in time used his remaining strength to kill a few enemies, but he was quickly submerged in the tide-like sea of undead. In a battlefield of this scale, even if one had the strength of a great demon king, it was difficult to stop a chariot. Only the high-level strength with territory power could truly defeat thousands of enemies. The demon emperor-level general on the outer edge of the circle formation, Tauros, was the legion commander of the 2nd Legion. He was brave and good at fighting. He was currently leading the army to resist the tide of undead in the front row. The strength of the high-level powerhouse was indeed powerful. Tauros was riding a mutated land pseudo-dragon. The scythe in his hand turned into an arc in the air. Each strike could cut off a large area of undead. Even the ghosts that could reduce physical damage could not resist this absolute power containing territory power. They were turned into ashes one after another. Tauros rode his mount and rushed left and right in the undead army. He was invincible. After killing a large circle, he safely returned to the vicinity of the circle formation. The soldiers of the 2nd Legion all shouted mighty. In their excitement, they defeated many undead. Seeing that the morale of the soldiers was high, Tauros raised his scythe high and rushed toward the enemy formation again. In fact, his attack consumed a lot of power, but only in this way could he improve the morale that had begun to decline. The soldiers of the capital were all elites who had undergone strict training, but after a long time, they inevitably had emotional fluctuations. This fluctuation was directly reflected in their combat power. In contrast, the undead themselves did not have the factor of morale. Even if Tauros destroyed many of them, they still kept advancing, and their combat power remained unchanged. Just as Tauros waved his scythe and rode the land pseudo-dragon to tear the undead formation again, the undead team in front suddenly made way, and a black figure appeared in front of him. This was a knight covered in black armor, riding a black ghost warhorse. The warhorse was wearing armor, and its eyes were faintly glowing. It looked exceptionally strange under the moonlight. Terror Knight! Tauros's pupils shrank slightly. If skeletons were soldiers, then Terror Knights were kings. They were the highest level of undead creatures, made of special dead souls and corpses. They were powerful knights during their lifetime, but their souls could not dissipate because of some kind of will or curse. They were reborn as undead and used resentment and killing as the source of power. Terror Knights were not those unconscious skeletons. They not only retained independent will in addition to obeying the controller, but they also had powerful strength and combat skills during their lifetime. The black visor of the Terror Knight revealed a bright, bewitching red light, locking the existence of Tauros. A huge knight's spear appeared in his hand. With a shake of the reins, the ghost warhorse spread its 4 hooves and rushed toward Tauros like a black lightning. Tauros did not show any weakness. He urged the land pseudo-dragon to meet the Terror Knight. The 2 galloping mounts crossed each other in the blink of an eye, and a clear, zhin sound even covered the earth-shaking battle cry. The soldiers in the rear only vaguely saw a flash of sparks. The 2 mounts had separated, turned their mounts at the same time, and confronted each other again from a distance. The black armor on the back of the Terror Knight cracked open, and black smoke leaked out from it, but the smoke was quickly absorbed into his body again. Tauros's silver shoulder armor was shattered, and there was a terrifying wound on his shoulder. The fragments of the armor were even squeezed into his flesh. Tauros did not show any pain on his face, but he looked at the Black Knight opposite him with a solemn expression. With just one blow, Tauros understood a few things in his heart. First, this Terror Knight was not inferior to him in terms of strength level, combat skills, and horsemanship. Second, the equipment on the opponent, including the horse armor, was not inferior to him. It was at least quasi-legendary grade. Third, the Terror Knight seemed to have a kind of spirit power interference similar to the art of fear, which made the land dragon feel fear. It hesitated when sprinting just now, causing his injury to be more serious than the opponent. This is a powerful opponent. Tauros's body burned with red flames, and his human face turned into the strongest combat form of a great demon. The flames wrapped the land dragon mount, and the art of fear that enveloped the land dragon was immediately dispelled. He and the mount were like a dazzling flame, once again facing the charging black lightning. Chapter 5:15. Boom! The collision of flames and lightning produced a powerful force field. With the point where the two collided as the center, the force field spread out in all directions. The ground trembled violently, and the gravel and debris seemed to be swept by a whirlwind, flying upside down into the air. Some undead in the distance who couldn't escape in time were shaken and even shattered. Next, there were several evenly matched fierce attacks. Neither side used territory, but each attack contained the strongest territory power. If one was careless, one might be cut down from the horse. Tauros already had several scars on his body, and his power was greatly consumed, but the fighting spirit in his eyes was even stronger. The scythe in his hand spun at an amazing speed, forming a vague circle. Under the terrifying wind pressure, the cracked slate on the nearby ground turned into powder. When the power was accumulated to the limit, Tauros shouted loudly. He waved his scythe in the direction of the Terror Knight with the power of rotation. 7 undulating flame ripples appeared on the ground like a fire dragon diving into the ground, surging forward violently. The Terror Knight was also preparing a powerful blow. The spear in his hand was wrapped in a large amount of black gas. The black gas quickly devoured some kind of power in the surrounding air, and even the space was affected to fluctuate. Almost at the same time when Tauros launched his ultimate move, the spear wrapped in black gas blasted toward Tauros like lightning. The two powerful attacks did not cancel each other out, but they passed through each other. The moment the 7 ripples touched the dread horsemen, they suddenly burst out from the ground. The flames that shot up into the sky exploded with a terrifying sharpness that contained the power of the domain. The dread horseman had just shot out his spear with all his strength, so he couldn't dodge it. Both he and his horse were torn apart and scattered. When the spear arrived, Tauros was also exhausted after launching his ultimate move, but the great demon's talent of teleportation was still there. Facing the knight's spear that exuded the soul-penetrating death breath, Tauros used his last remaining strength to launch teleportation and teleported away from the mount at the critical moment. Just at the moment when Tauros completed teleportation and stabilized his figure, he suddenly felt that his soul was locked by the death breath again. He saw the spear also appeared in front of him in an instant. When he reacted, the cold death breath had penetrated his heart and came out from his back. The black gas that wrapped around the spear gradually condensed into a human figure, holding the handle of the spear. It was the Terror Knight from before. His body was intact, but his armor was broken. A large amount of black gas leaked out from his body from time to time because of the slashes. With the perception of Pegasus wrapped in territory power, he had already sensed the special spirit fluctuations faintly coming from this area when he was in the center of the circle formation. It affected the attack frequency of the entire undead army. The closer he was to the black mist now, the clearer the feeling was: the undead magician must be here. The other party seemed to have noticed the approach of Pegasus, and he began to move back quickly. Pegasus was even more certain that the moving guy was the magician behind the undead army, so he chased after him without hesitation. The magician's means were very superb. He seemed to be divided into countless clones that fled in all directions. However, these could not confuse Pegasus' spirit power. After locking the magician's true body, Pegasus overtook the other party in a few ups and downs and blocked in front of him. At this time, both sides had passed through the heavy, dark sky curtain. They should be in front of a hillside outside town Daiko. This was a tall and thin man in a black cloak. He was faintly wrapped in black gas. The true face of his face could not be seen clearly, and his whole body faintly exuded the fluctuations of dark elements. "Impossible! You actually saw through my mirror clone!" The black-cloaked magician's voice was filled with horror. Pegasus sneered. "It's just a trivial trick. How can it escape the demon overlord's territory perception? However, you, a magician of the peak stage of the Demon Emperor, can actually control so many undead army. There are even Terror Knights and vampires who are also Demon Emperor level. This surprises me. I don't know what benefits you are standing on the Dark Moon's side. Now you only have 2 choices. The first is to destroy, the second is to surrender. I will give you a minute to choose. Perhaps you can try to resist stubbornly." How could the black-cloaked magician be willing to surrender? Several spears that seemed to be made of white bones appeared around him, and they blasted toward Pegasus from all directions. However, before they touched Pegasus, those bone spears stopped, trembled and roared, but they couldn't move forward at all. Pegasus waved his hand, and a bone spear flew involuntarily in front of him. He gently grasped it, and it returned to a white bone less than 1 meter. Very novel magic. Using white bones as the core, it extends and condenses the power of death into a point. Its power is indeed commendable. It's a pity that you met me. I'm a dual cultivator of magic and power. I don't even need to dodge this level of attack." As soon as he finished speaking, all the bone spears around him exploded and scattered into powder. The black-cloaked magician chanted the incantation in a low voice, and a huge blood-red long-handled scythe appeared out of thin air. It flashed in front of Pegasus in an instant, turning into countless sharp chi that was enough to split the space and wrapped around him. It was the strongest single-target dark magic, Dark Blood Scythe. Pegasus sneered. His body was instantly steaming with unparalleled momentum. He directly punched without dodging. If it was the Dark Blood Scythe, released by a demon overlord opponent, he definitely did not dare to take it head-on like this. However, the magician in front of him was only the peak stage of the Demon Emperor. Although he was only 1 step away from the Demon Overlord, he was still incomparable to the real demon overlord. Under the terrifying pressure of this punch, the dark blood scythe cracked inch by inch, and the sharp chi disappeared without a trace. Pegasus intended to intimidate the opponent, but it was a pity that his expression was in vain. The magician had already turned into a wisp of black smoke and fled to the rear when he smashed the dark blood scythe. "Time's up. Your actions show that you have chosen the path of death." Pegasus' figure appeared in front of the black smoke in an instant. As he was about to kill the magician, an extremely dangerous warning sign suddenly appeared in his heart. His sprinting figure unbelievably flipped backward, flying backward in an action that violated the laws of physics. Almost at the same time, a huge monster broke out of the ground. Although Pegasus braked in time, he was still half a beat slower. He was hit by the giant shadow, and he suddenly flew back for dozens of meters. He barely stabilized his figure in the air. His face was a little pale, and a trace of blood slowly overflowed from the corner of his mouth, but his gaze became exceptionally solemn. In his sight was a terrifying huge body. Giant dragon. To be more precise, it was the skeleton of a giant dragon. Except for a pair of giant wings that seemed to be condensed by some kind of energy, the rest were all bones. The white bones were wrapped in a layer of strange luster. In the two empty eye sockets, the red light representing life began to burn. Its whole body exuded a terrifying and awe-inspiring breath. Horror flashed in Pegasus's eyes. He had never seen dragons in this form. Could it be that they are also transformed by this undead magician? It is incredible that a magician at the Demon Emperor level can actually transform a Demon Overlord level dragons. This strange dragon not only has the dragon demeanor of a giant dragon, but they also exudes a breath that is comparable to his. From the terrifying impact that shattered his ribs just now, it can be seen that this is a real intermediate stage of the Demon Overlord monster. Not only that, but that strike also contained a strange power. It seemed to have greatly depleted his life force, and his strength had also weakened. Fortunately, the Lucifer royal family's bloodline talent, Heart of Light and Dark, could absorb various light and dark powers. The weakening only lasted for a while before it began to fade quickly. "Let me introduce my most powerful partner, the Spirit Dragon." The magician in the black cloak let out a creepy laugh. The red light in the eyes of the Spirit Dragon flashed, and a cold murderous intention locked on Pegasus. This wasn't a knockoff made by a slime in Mountain Shilong, but it was the highest achievement of the most famous undead magician's career, after countless experiments. The real Spirit Dragon. Chapter 516. Facing this terrifying undead dragon, Pegasus couldn't care less about healing his injuries. His figure flickered and rushed straight toward the magician in a black cloak. The magician was the key to controlling the Spirit Dragon. As long as he was eliminated, the souls of this terrifying monster and the entire undead army would be completely rest in peace. The magician in a black cloak had expected this move. The Spirit Dragon intercepted Pegasus like lightning. The swift and violent movement was not like a skeleton at all, but a real dragon's. 3 pairs of light wings appeared behind Pegasus. His speed suddenly accelerated as he soared into the sky, avoiding the Spirit Dragon's attack. His right hand turned into a blade and slashed downward in the air. This slash was somewhat similar to the posture of Shenrui's Aura Blade, but the effect was completely different. Aura Blade was invincible, but this slash was an irresistible force. The surging force was like a giant palm that hit the Spirit Dragon's head. The huge body fell from midair, leaving a huge crater with cracks that spread nearly 100 meters on the ground. Pegasus did not chase after the Spirit Dragon. He punched directly toward the magician in a black cloak. The power of this punch was no less than the previous blow. The magician in a black cloak screamed. The surrounding temperature suddenly dropped, and there seemed to be some strange distortion in the space in an instant. In the blink of an eye, this punch had hit the magician's body, and his body was torn apart. However, with the distortion of the space, the scattered body fragments strangely reassembled into their original state. After recovering his body, The magician panted heavily, still in a state of shock. Pegasus frowned slightly. The opponent should have just combined the power of territory and the power of dark magic to escape this blow. Although this move is extremely mysterious and shows subtle and ingenious magic control, it also consumes a lot of spirit power at the same time. It is impossible to use the same trick to avoid the second blow. The big difference between the Demon Emperor level and the Demon Overlord level could not be made up by the mysteriousness of skills. Spirit Dragon! Protect me! The magician in a black cloak knew that he was in danger and shouted loudly. The spectre dragon exploded once again and attacked Paffinthus. Paffinthus spread his holy light wings, and his body rapidly retreated in the air. He was actually even faster than he was moving forward. As he retreated, his hands had already gathered a great amount of power. Black Fire Meteor! Pegasus' figure suddenly paused, and he shouted. Countless huge black fireballs blasted out from his hands. Each fireball had the power to tear through the air. They flew toward the spectre dragon like dark meteors tearing through the night sky. This was a big move of Pegasus combined with the Lucifer royal family's dark flame talent, and its power was amazing. These fireballs were so fast that the spectre dragon couldn't dodge them. When it was hit, there was a series of explosions. If it was a real dragon, it would probably be screaming in pain by now. After Pegasus succeeded in his attack, he no longer hesitated. With a turn of his body, he flew toward the black-cloaked magician with all his strength under the acceleration of the wings of holy light. With a strong enemy like the phantom dragon, casting the domain would instead waste more time. The urgent matter at hand was to kill this magician in one blow, and completely solve the scourge of the phantom dragon and the undead army in the fastest and most effective way. Pegasus' 5 fingers burned with destructive black flames. This time, the black-cloaked magician would not get lucky. The magician was shocked. Knowing that he couldn't dodge, he controlled the phantom dragon to withstand the power of the black fire meteor and pounced toward Pegasus. Pegasus was determined to solve the root of this disaster. He ignored the aggressive attack of the phantom dragon and fully unleashed the power of the wings of holy light, rushing straight toward the black-cloaked magician. Anyway, as long as I kill the magician, I can stop all the undead. Almost in the blink of an eye, Pegasus had already appeared in front of the magician. The other party was obviously not good at close combat, and the difference in strength between them was too big. Pegasus grabbed the magician's head, and in the midst of his screams, the terrifying black flames burned his entire body into ashes. However, in the next second, Pegasus' complexion suddenly changed because the momentum of the phantom dragon did not stop because of the death of the core controller as expected. Instead, it became faster and bit him, and its sharp teeth penetrated his body. It happened so suddenly that Pegasus had no time to react. It was not until the tearing pain came that he came back to his senses and screamed. The phantom dragon bit Pegasus' body and shook it fiercely, shattering all his resistance, and then slammed him to the side. Pegasus was thrown away by a terrifying force, smashing a terrifying human-shaped pit on the hard mountain rock. Under the huge force, the crushed rocks as a background cracked and fell, and Pegasus' body fell straight down and fell to the ground. The fall almost shattered his bones, but the most serious injury was the few teeth marks that penetrated his body. His left leg, shoulder, and internal organs were severely injured. Blood kept flowing out of the big holes that were bitten, and some of the shattered organs also flowed out of his body. Pegasus desperately burned the last of his strength. Gritting his teeth, he was just about to stand up when a huge body pressed down on him. The white claws heavily stepped on his back. Suddenly, the sound of bones breaking rang out, and his whole body fell into the air. The power of the dragons was too terrifying. Even the body of the demon overlord could not resist such a strong attack. This blow also crushed Pegasus' last hope. There is an old saying in the demon realm, a slight difference can lead to a huge error. The familiar voice sounded. It was the magician in the black cloak who should have been burned to ashes. Pegasus' neck bone was broken, and he was unable to turn his head. The horror in his heart was at its peak. My dark flame, clearly annihilated this magician. Actually, your thoughts are not wrong. As long as I die, the undead creatures that I control, including this specter dragon, will all be finished. Unfortunately, even though you were not fooled by my mirror image projections and found my true body, you do not know what this true body is. The dark flame of the Lucifer royal family is indeed very powerful, but for a magician who has transformed himself into the dead, destruction is far less terrifying than vitality. Compared with the dark flame, someone's, Nirvana's flame, is the power that truly frightens me. Transformed into the dead? Pegasus finally understood. Corpse necromancer. This magician is a corpse necromancer. The corpse necromancer has no flesh and blood, only a skeleton body. They store their soul essence in some kind of container. As long as the soul essence does not die, the corpse necromancer can use the corpse to resurrect indefinitely. The soul container is also called the phylactery. The dark flame only burned the corpse necromancer's temporary body. Even if it destroyed the thing in the soul state in front of him, it still could not really destroy him. The Archmage's eerie laughter rang out again. Speaking of which, I really have to thank a certain someone for giving me the dragon's bone. However, from the looks of this battle, it seems that this masterpiece still needs to be improved. What makes me hesitate now is one thing. Should I try to transform a demon overlord level undead or hand over a living demon overlord to the generous master? Pegasus could no longer hear the magician's eerie laughter, and he couldn't even feel the terrifying oppression behind him. This is indeed a fatal error of judgment. The previous pretense of the magician was deliberately creating an illusion, if it weren't for the fact that the army was surrounded and he was eager for success. If I was patiently prepared for a tough battle from the beginning, in this way, Palor's army is really in a desperate situation. How much terrifying power does the dark moon have hidden? Blood kept flowing out, and Pegasus's consciousness began to become more and more blurred. Just when Palor's army was in a desperate situation, on the other side, Chinray and the White Feather Estate also arrived at his destination, the Cold Mist Swamp. Like the name, the Cold Mist Swamp was full of white mist, and the temperature was extremely low. The frozen ice pits could be seen at any time on the ground. Chinray had experienced training in various scenes, including icebergs, volcanoes, seabed, etc. He could naturally easily adapt to this kind of harsh environment, but the swamp seemed to contain some powerful creatures. The griffin just refused to fly forward when it reached the edge. Chinray knew that he couldn't force it. After landing, he let the griffin leave freely. With the Stargate, as long as the mission was completed, returning to the White Feather City was only a moment. Wow! With a moment of inattention, Chinray's feet sank into the mud again, up to his knees. Although he was no stranger to the swamp environment, it was the first time he came to the Cold Mist Swamp after all. It was not a comfortable thing for the muddy water to seep into the boots. Especially if he kept walking like this, it would stick to his shoes and socks. It felt terrible. However, Chinray didn't care about this. He just moved forward quickly according to the magic map in his hand. According to the map, after passing through the mangrove forest, he could see the Lobe mine. Chinray suddenly stopped, and his figure disappeared almost in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! 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 Several arrows penetrated his original position. Chinray's figure appeared in front of the tree, and he saw a winding figure retreating quickly. The upper body was a nearly naked female body, and the lower body was a snake body. She was holding a bow in her hand. Medusa. I didn't expect Medusa to exist in this swamp. Chinray was the master of the Medusa tribe in the underground of Mountain Shillong. He didn't reject this kind of demonic beast that outsiders feared. Instead, he felt a sense of familiarity. Along the way, in order to avoid some blind demonic beasts, Chinray deliberately released the breath of Demon Emperor strength. However, these Medusas were only Demon King level strength, and they actually dared to take the initiative to attack. Obviously, he had been regarded as an intruder. Please don't misunderstand. I mean no harm. Chinray tried to communicate with the nearest Medusa through analytical eyes. The Medusa's figure paused and glanced at Chenrui. The golden snake pupils in her eyes suddenly radiated a strange light. Chenrui only felt a slight numbness, but he was not affected at all. He was no longer the rookie in the underground world of Mountain Shilong. Otherwise, this stare full of Medusa's talent power could instantly turn his whole body into stone. Now, with just a slight movement of spirit power, the opponent's petrification eyes lost its effect. Seeing that the petrification was ineffective, this Medusa quickly retreated. The Medusas behind continued to shoot arrows to stop it. Chenrui thought for a while and did not chase. He continued to move toward the lobe mine according to the direction shown on the map. After walking through the woods for a while, Medusas appeared in front of him again. This time, the number was far more than the last time, and they all attacked without any explanation. It seemed that the mangrove forest was likely to be the Medusa's territory, but it was also the fastest shortcut to the mining area. The reason why Chenrui chose this path was to save time. Now, it seemed that this time would probably take more time than planned. The Medusa's arrowheads and machetes were made of metal, but they were much worse than the current Medusa tribe of Mountain Shilong. However, their strength was generally higher than the Medusa tribe of Mountain Shilong. The worst one had the strength of higher demon, and there were many demon king level. There were even 2 great demon king level. It seemed that it was a very powerful tribe. It was not that the Medusa tribe of the underground world of Mountain Shilong was weak, but because they had lost a large number of elites in the battle with the earth elementals controlled by Glorfin in the past 400 years. Even Tim's mother-in-law, Queen Medusa, was sacrificed. Since the communication with analytical eyes was unsuccessful, Chenrui did not want to waste time and energy, so he chose the most effective method of communication, fists. These Medusas had a big gap in strength with him. Besides, Chenrui was very familiar with the Medusa's fighting habits. His figure was like a ghost. Every time he moved, a Medusa would fall. After a while, except for the Medusa of the intermediate stage of Great Demon King, the rest were all knocked down. Chenrui controlled his strength very well. He didn't kill them, he just knocked them down or stunned them. Chenrui grabbed the machete that the Medusa slashed at him. He ignored the petrifying gaze of the Medusa's eyes. With a shake of his wrist, the Medusa lost its grip on the machete and flew backward. It barely managed to maintain its balance by relying on the snake's body. "I'm not the enemy of Medusa. I want to see your queen. Go and inform her. I'll wait for her here." Chenrui exerted force in his hand, and the machete was suddenly twisted into a ball. The threat was self-evident. Medusa was a highly intelligent creature. She looked at the unconscious companions on the ground, including a great demon king who was as powerful as her, and then looked at the deformed machete in Chenrui's hand. Finally, she nodded and turned back. Soon, a group of Medusas appeared in his sight. Chenrui's gaze fell on the Medusa at the front. This one's appearance and skin were much more delicate than the others. She was wearing a tight leather armor. The lower body of the snake had colorful scales. She was holding 2 silver machetes in her hands. The quality was much better than the one twisted by Chenrui. What Chenrui cared about was not her appearance, but her strength. Race, Medusa, mutated, comprehensive strength assessment, A. Generally speaking, the upper limit of the Medusa tribe was the Great Demon King. Queen Medusa in the underground world of Mountain Shilong stayed at the peak of the Great Demon King for many years and could not break through. This Queen Medusa with mutated bloodline actually reached the strength of the intermediate stage of the Demon Emperor. She could be regarded as a genius of the Medusa tribe. Queen Medusa was also looking at Chenrui. She moved forward and said, "I'm the queen of the Cold Mist Medusa tribe. Can you understand our language?" Chenrui nodded and replied through analytical eyes, "Yes, your royal highness." Queen Medusa's snake pupils coldly glanced at the Medusas who fell to the ground. She noticed that they were not in life-threatening danger, so her expression was slightly relieved. She nodded and said, "As long as you let my people go, I can give you some snake blood fruits." Snake blood fruits? Chenrui faintly understood where the misunderstanding was. Chapter 5:17. Your Royal Highness Queen Medusa, I think you misunderstood. My name is Chenrui, and I'm not here for the snake blood fruit. The reason why I had a conflict with the Medusas was because they attacked me first. Despite this, I still didn't really hurt them. If I have offended you, please forgive me, Your Royal Highness. Chenrui left the restrained great demon King Medusa and walked to Queen Medusa. He put his right hand on his chest, nodded slightly, and performed a Medusa's etiquette. This etiquette stunned Queen Medusa. She stared at Chenrui for a moment, then she looked at her people who were starting to get up one after another. Finally, she returned the etiquette. The hostile atmosphere between both sides finally eased. Rather than saying that this etiquette played a role, it was better to say that Chenrui's strength was not inferior to Queen Medusa's. If he was just a weakling, he would have been turned into a stone statue long ago. Your Royal Highness, I'm not an enemy of Medusa. On the contrary, I'm the closest friends with many Medusas. This is also the biggest reason why I'm friendly to your tribe. Chenrui tried to show kindness in his speech. As far as I know, the snake blood fruit can help the Medusa tribe reproduce, but the effect is not very good. It's far less than the fountain of life. Chenrui was not a rookie who just came to the demon realm. Now that he controlled the mountain Shillong Medusa tribe, he also had a good understanding of the Medusa tribe's habits. Fountain of life! Queen Medusa was a little surprised. That's a sacred object for reproduction of life. It's extremely rare. Not to mention our tribe, even the entire swamp doesn't have a fountain of life. Chenrui originally proposed the fountain of life as a scheme. He couldn't help but be moved when he heard this answer, but he didn't disclose that he had a fountain of life. He nodded and said, I see. No wonder I had such a misunderstanding with the Medusa warriors of your tribe. Please forgive me for asking more. Will there be enemies who will come to snatch the snake blood fruit? Queen Medusa did not answer. Chenrui knew that the other party was still quite wary. He smiled slightly. My destination this time is the Lobe Mine. As long as your highness trusts me, I will do my best to help the Medusa tribe. As he spoke, he took out a few items. There are a few pieces of equipment here. Consider them my gifts to your highness. A dark golden scimitar inlaid with a cyan gem. A round shield with a Medusa pattern on it. It was an exquisite golden red armor. A silver bow brimming with magic. A quiver of magic arrows made entirely of metal. Queen Medusa and the Medusa warriors looked at these exquisite and powerful weapons and armors in surprise. These were simply the best equipment tailor-made for the Medusa race. These 5 are for Her Highness the Queen. There are some that are of lower quality. Let me see, there are about 10 more sets that can be given to the brave warriors under the Queen's command. Chenrui took out a lot of brand new equipment from the storage warehouse. As I said, I'm a Medusa's best friend. I made these equipment when I helped a Medusa tribe. Unfortunately, there are not many left. I will give them all to you. The so-called worse equipment was far better than the set on the Queen's current body. This set was already the best in the Medusa tribe at present. Queen Medusa did not hesitate to take off the armor on her body, allowing her plump chest to be exposed. She changed into the exquisite equipment and distributed the rest of the high-quality equipment according to the strength of the Medusas. Including the Queen, all the Medusas who got the equipment seemed reluctant to put it down. Their hostility toward Chenrui gradually disappeared. Queen Medusa saluted Chenrui. Lanliza thanks you on behalf of the Cold Mist tribe, Medusa's friend Chenrui. Your Highness Lanliza is too polite. Chenrui finally won the other party's trust, and he was secretly delighted. It is the happiest thing to be able to solve the misunderstanding between us. If you need help, please tell me. As a friend, I will not be stingy with my strength. Queen Medusa nodded. My friend Chenrui, just call me Lanliza. There are indeed some troublesome enemies who want to take our snake blood fruits. Moreover, these enemies should be related to the mine you are about to go to. Related to the Lobe mine? As soon as he heard this, Chenrui's ears suddenly perked up. These enemies should have lived in the depths of the mine, and we will only occasionally see them outside. Now, I don't know why they all ran out, and they even targeted the snake blood fruits. We had several battles with the enemies, and there were victories and defeats on both sides. A lot of snake blood fruits were also taken away. What enemies are they? Shinrei frowned. These enemies can defeat Medusas and seize the snake blood fruits. Their combat power must be extraordinary, and they came out of the mine. I must understand them clearly. Liza shook her head. Although there are a lot of memories and knowledge in my bloodline inheritance, I don't know what kind of demons or demonic beasts they are. They are all females with blue skin. In terms of combat power alone, they are weaker than Medusas. Even if 2 demon emperor-level female leaders join forces, they are not my opponent. It's just that these enemies' magic power is extremely powerful. They can instantly cast various negative and buff magic, and they are not affected by Medusa's petrification talent. During the battle, our combat power is often greatly reduced because of the opponent's negative magic. Shenrei was a little puzzled. Generally speaking, the underground creatures living in mines and so on may be cavemen, taurens, Medusas, evil eyes, etc. But he had never heard of this kind of all-female blue-skin magic race. It didn't even belong to any demon realm creature that he knew. Only succubus and Medusas were all-female races, and the latter was classified as demonic beasts because of their language and snake body. Not hearing of it didn't mean it didn't exist. The demon realm was huge, and there were all kinds of strange species. Not to mention Shinrui, a human who came to the demon realm for a short time. Even Queen Medusa, who had inherited knowledge, didn't know. At this moment, a Medusa warrior hurriedly reported, "Queen! Those blue enemies have appeared again. They have broken through our line of defense and are approaching the snake blood fruit tree." Queen Medusa's snake pupils were murderous. She waved her newly acquired quasi-legendary great machete, and her double-forked tongue hissed angrily. "Go to the snake blood fruit tree immediately to meet the enemy." Shenrei wanted to see the strange creatures coming out of the mine, so he said, "I'll go with you, my friend Liza." "Okay." Queen Medusa didn't stand on ceremony. She nodded vigorously, and her body wriggled forward quickly. Her speed was actually faster than mounts such as demonic horses. Shenrei tapped his feet and followed closely behind Queen Medusa. Soon, the team rushed to the depths of the mangrove forest. From a distance, they saw 7 or 8 fruit trees in front of them, bearing hundreds of purple-red fruits. It should be the snake blood fruit tree that the Medusas relied on. Not far from the fruit tree, a fierce battle was taking place. The enemy was a group of strange creatures. There were about 20 of them. They were slender, and they all looked female. Their feet seemed to be floating, and the way they moved was similar to flying. These women had silver-white hair, beautiful looks, and sky-blue skin. They were naked without any clothes, but many parts of their bodies were covered with strange patterns that emitted golden and white light. As Queen Liza said, the speed and power of the blue women's magic release were quite amazing, but they were not offensive magic. They were all negative or buff magic. The buff magic was naturally for companions. As for the negative magic, it was for Medusas. Shinrei noticed that the magic of these women turned out to be group. That was to say, as long as there was a haste spell, the companions within the range could become faster. Similarly, a decelerate spell could slow down the speed of a circle of Medusas on the opposite side. A blue woman at the forefront spread out her hand, and a row of Medusa warriors in front of her staggered like they were drunk. They were unstable. This woman did not kill these stunned Medusas, but she flew directly to the snake blood fruit tree at a very fast speed. When she was about to approach the fruit tree, the woman's body suddenly trembled. Her towering chest was nailed by a silver arrow like lightning, followed by 2 more arrows that shot her abdomen and shoulder. The woman's body leaned back with a painful expression on her face. The strange thing was that the wound did not bleed, but the golden light of the patterns on her body seemed to dim a lot. The one who shot the arrow was Queen Medusa. She felt that the newly acquired weapon was indeed powerful. Just the bow and arrow alone was more than 10 times more powerful than before. With a shout of excitement, the Medusas all rushed toward the enemy. As a friend of Medusa, Chunrei naturally had to show off. When Queen Medusa shot the arrow, his figure bounced and took the lead to rush toward the blue woman. The aura blade in his hand slashed down from the air. The woman had already pulled out the silver arrow from her body. With a wave of her hand, Chunrei suddenly felt that his speed had slowed down. This aura blade that had slowed down was dodged by the woman's swift movement, leaving a deep mark on the ground. The woman noticed the strength of this enemy, and she waved her hands continuously. For a time, various negative feelings such as weakness, dizziness, and slowness came one after another, and the effects were superimposed without any conflict. Although the level of these magic was not very high, the effect had definitely reached the highest realm of magic. Even if Chunrei had an anti-magic physique that could reduce magic damage and negative status effects by half, he still felt quite uncomfortable. He clearly had power, but he was bound by various factors and couldn't exert his normal combat power. He was very aggrieved. He finally understood the feeling of the Medusas fighting against these women. At this time, the relevant information of this strange woman had appeared in analytical eyes. Race, lamp spirit, alchemy life form, comprehensive strength assessment, A physique, B+, strength, B spirit, A speed, A dash. Analysis, immortal attribute, magic body. This information surprised Chunrei. What is an alchemy life form? And it also has the powerful attribute of immortality? By the way, the name of lamp spirit and that kind of magic method seemed to be similar to the soldiers in a classic game in my memory. It seems that there are still many coincidences between planes. But now is obviously not the time to think about this kind of thing. The rapid speed and powerful magic effect of the lamp spirits also caused the Medusas that surrounded them to be hit one after another. Even Queen Medusa was the same. Seeing that the lamp spirits were about to pick the snake blood fruit, 10 strange human figures suddenly appeared around the fruit tree. These human figures were about 2 meters tall. Their bodies were made of metal and glowed with dark golden light. The metal man's body was strong and powerful. What surprised the lamp spirits the most was that when the endless negative magic fell on the metal man, it had no effect.